so that you can find out what is in it.
What?
If you like your doctor, you will be able to keep your doctor.
What difference at this point does it make?
Doesn't make sense.
If you're looking to make sense out of what's going on in the world today, then you've come to the right place. Welcome to Southern Sense Talk Radio with your host, Annie, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, and featuring Curtis C.S. Bennett and the most interesting guests that you'll find anywhere on Internet radio. And you can join the show and let your voice be heard by dialing 917-889-3675. So sit back, relax, and remember, Southern Sense is common sense.
Friends, the entire world is experiencing food shortages. Supply chain breakdowns continue to have a domino effect on everything, especially food production. Farmers can't plant as many crops now because of fertilizer shortages, forced regulations, and of course, high fuel prices. This will cause more painful food shortages when we run out of the food we're eating now. You know, food takes time to grow. So when farmers don't plant, well, months later, we don't eat. That's why you need to prepare for an increasing number of food shortages. And the best way is to invest in Ready Hour emergency food from My Patriot Supply. It's a perfect hedge against skyrocketing prices and shortages. Right now, save $50 on a 4-week food kit from My Patriot Supply. Go to preparewithsouthernsense.com and get your $50 savings on a 4-week emergency food kits that average over 2,000 calories per day. That's preparewithsouthernsense.com. Those who know what's coming are getting prepared now. Well, if you don't want to type in that whole big thing saying preparewithsouthernsense.com and you're on my website, which is Southern Sense, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense, as in commonsense.com, you can easily click on My Patriot Supply and go directly to the website and get your $50 savings. As I'm telling you now, those who know what's coming are getting prepared right now. And shouldn't you? Prepare with southern-sense.com. That's southern-sense.com. Click on My Patriot Supply. Do it now. Well, welcome back to another adventure here on Southern Sense, listening live on Blog Talk Radio, SHR Media, Global Enlightenment Radio, iHeart, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, YouTube, Facebook. I'm running out of breath, and half a dozen other places. Best way to watch us or listen to us is just go to the name of the show, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie, along with my special co-host, because Curtis is moving from one house to another, so he's not here. I want to welcome back the one, the only, Uncle Ted, former Congressman Ted Yoho. Good afternoon, Ted. How are you today?
I'm doing fine, Annie. Thanks for having me on. Look forward to your show. I've seen the agenda, and it's going to be a great show, as always.
Yes, we have a lot to talk about. Nick Searcy and Chris Burgard have a new movie out they worked on together, a documentary called Capital Punishment. And I watched it last night. And woo doggy, are they opening up a can of worms there? And that's not the whole story. And there's more to come. We have returning to our show, Kevin McGary. He is the president co-founder of Every Black Lives Matter. And they've got a couple of new things they are working on. Suze Shafford, she's a HIPAA security analyst, and she's got some new things she's working on. And then we have my friend from the Epoch Times, or he says Epoch Times, Mark Tapscott. And this week, Heritage Foundation is sending us Jake Denton. He's a Tech Policy Center research associate. And there's a lot of stuff going on with big tech and censorship and what's going on between the Biden administration and big tech and the social networks. Boy, are we getting into some deep water here, Ted. But it's a lot to do and a lot to talk about.
I agree. I mean, there is so much going on. I've got a friend of mine that has another radio talk show. He got taken off of YouTube for something that was posted in 2021. And so they're going retroactively too. And this is something that we've never experienced in this country.
No, I agree.
Dangerous times.
I've been banned from YouTube. I had to go through a back door and open up a new account. So people, look for Southern Sense on YouTube. And if you see a low membership, sign up. I mean, I had a great following over on YouTube, and I said something about Trump phobia in the title, and I think that was the straw that broke the camel's back. And they said, nope, can't have anything to do with Trump on here. Can't have anything dealing with election integrity. Shame on you.
No, come on, Annie. You're accusing them of not being tolerant.
Oh, no. It's a one-way street.
Can't have that.
One-way street.
Yeah, really.
Law for thee and not for me. Oh, geez. Yeah, so
Really.
I've had Facebook posts taken down. Actually, I think I'm banned on. Is it? Holy shit! Tumblr, Reddit. Reddit has banned me. So
Rumble?
yeah, I'm racking them up.
You sure are. Well, those are like battle scars or medals. Mm-hmm. So keep doing it.
I'm gonna keep at it. You know, the new news that hit the screen last night was this verdict against Alex Jones. Now, I thought he was a little over the top when he was making the comments about Parkland, but he wasn't naming names or saying anything, specific. He's just saying, this is how I feel. And suddenly, because you may be a conservative or extreme right wing, because you have this feeling that something's not right with whatever is being reported, it's slur, it's scandalous, it's criminal, and now he has this fine of $985 billion, almost a $1 trillion fine. This is crazy.
Right. It is. I mean, it's just absolutely crazy.
What happened to free speech? Whatever happened to free speech? So,
we're in a very dangerous time. At some point, I want to tell you about the hearing I was in. I might have alluded to it last time about the biggest threat to our national security is white national supremacists. Mm-hmm. And that was about a year and a half, 2 years before the election.
Yeah. White supremacists is the big one. No, we're not talking about Antifa or Black Lives Matter or all the other groups such as the Islamic extremists that are coming across our porous border or the Chinese agents that have even infiltrated NYPD. No, we're not talking about that as being a threat to our national security. But we have one incident on January 6th where 2 women were killed that were members of the crowd. There were no weapons inside the Capitol. But that is far worse than the Civil War and the Holocaust, according to them. But we won't talk about the 663 riots by Antifa and Black Lives Matter in the last 2 years of Trump's presidency. We won't talk about that.
Yeah, no, we won't. it's a double standard, and it's intentional. It's intentional to bring that leftist, actually, it's a communist narrative out, and they're doing that intentionally. And any form of dissent, they are going after, and they're going after hard, as you're seeing with the people that were protesting January 6th that they call insurrectionists, trying to overthrow the government, to the Alex Jones. But if they say something, they get a pass. They get a pass, and the American people that are middle of the road and to the right are tired of it.
Yeah, we are. And we're starting to push back. And that's one of the things we're going to be talking to with Jake Denton of the Heritage, because that's some of the things he's working on. But that said, those, Ted, that listen to the show know that we dedicate each and every show to a fallen hero. And unfortunately, prior to us going live, you and I were discussing the increase of attacks on law enforcement. And today's show is going to be dedicated to Sergeant Nicholas W. Tullier of East Baton Rouge Parish, his Parish Sheriff's Office out of Louisiana. The end of watch was Thursday, May 5, 2022. And this is coming from Coffee or Dee by Noelle Hui. And she writes, East Baton Rouge Sheriff's motorman, Sergeant Nick Tullier, was buried May 10th of 2022 in Louisiana. It took 3 gunshot wounds and nearly 6 years in and out of comas before East Baton Rouge Sheriff motorman Sergeant Nick Tullier died. He took his last breath that Thursday, May 5th, at Louisiana's Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center. He was 46. The victim of a July 17, 2016 ambush sprung by a Missouri man, Gavin Log, outside of a Be Quick gas station in Baton Rouge. Emergency dispatchers had called both the Baton Rouge Police Department and a sheriff's deputies to respond to reports of a masked man carrying a rifle down a highway. A Marine Corps veteran Long shot and killed 2 police officers and a deputy that day. He also wounded a city police officer and 2 deputies, one of them, Tullier, who was shot in the head, stomach, and shoulder, before SWAT team officers arrived and killed the 29-year-old Long. It was no surprise to me when I realized that Nick had run into the gun battle that day. Louisiana State Police Sergeant Marcus Smith told the mourners at Tullier's funeral. Nick encountered that gunman in the parking lot, and he engaged him with the full intent of stopping the evil that had taken the lives of 3 police officers, Smith said. After the ambush, surgeons placed Tullier on life support. He wasn't supposed to survive the hour, but he lived another 5 years and 10 months in hospitals, part of the time in a coma, often undergoing surgeries. Nicholas Wayne Nick Tullier was born May 27, 1975, and he died from the medical complications tied to the gunshot wounds on May 5, 2022, at Louisiana's Our Lady of the Lake Regional Medical Center. I can only imagine that Nick's heavenly entrance was a party that is still going on, said East Baton Rouge Sheriff Sid Gauthier during his Tuesday eulogy. And to me, when Nick walked up those pearly gates, and when St. Peter came down to welcome him, no doubt in my mind that his first question was, "Where's a Harley shop?" After the service, Tullier was buried at Evergreen Memorial Park in Denham Springs. He joined the East Baton Rouge Parish Sheriff's Office in 1996. He served in corrections, communications, and then uniformed patrol at both the Klein Peter and the Central substations before moving to Traffic Division in 2006 as a corporal. If you know anything about motormen, you know that we're a different breed of police officer, Smith told mourners. We do things a little bit differently than everybody else, but being a motorman was something that Nick absolutely lived for. His uniform was always impeccable. His motorcycle, always well shined, and he absolutely loved being a motorman. I will add from Elise Carmosino from theadvocate.com, and she writes, mourners struggling to find meaning in the death of a longtime sheriff's deputy, Sergeant Nick Tullier, found plenty of meaning in his life. He died at the age of 46, nearly 6 years after being wounded in an ambush. He proved to others that physical conditions don't measure the value of a human life, wrote Elisa Alfin Jenkins in an essay published on the back of the funeral program. The father of two, who was promoted to sergeant posthumously at the funeral, reminded us how hard and dangerous it can be to a law enforcement officer, she wrote. Thank you, Nick. Thank you for all the times you chose to see this through to the end, despite the pain and questions, Jenkins wrote. For you, it was the hardest 2,118 days. It was not in vain, and it all had a purpose. So much good came from the last 6 years of your life. Hundreds turned out for his funeral, and countless more lined the 15-mile procession route after 2 hours service at the Healing Place Church on Highland Road. Governor John Beale Edwards called Tullier a true hero. He said the city shouldn't dwell on July 17, 2016, when he was shot, but rather should concentrate on the outpouring of support for the Baton Rouge community gave him. Darkness will never win, Governor Edwards said. We won't let it. God won't let it. Tullier was the 4th officer to die after he and 5 others were shot at an airline highway shopping complex in July 2016. The attack was believed to be retaliatory ambush following the high-profile death of Alton Sterling, a black man killed by police outside a nearby convenience store 12 days earlier, spurring nationwide protests. The shooter, Gavin Long, traveled to Baton Rouge from Missouri in order to confront police. 3 of the officers, EBRSO Deputy Brad Garofola and Baton Rouge policeman Montrell Jackson and Matthew Gerald, died during the attack. Tullier, who was shot 3 times, once in the head, was rushed to a hospital in critical condition. Long was ultimately shot dead by a Baton Rouge police sniper less than 20 minutes after the attack began. The events of that day left a lasting impact, not only on Tullier's friends and family, but on law enforcement officers everywhere, said retired East Baton Rouge Sheriff's Deputy Stephen Gallo Sr. and his wife, Barbara Gallo. So stand down, Sergeant Tullier. Your end of tour. We'll take your watch from here. Today's show is dedicated to all the brave men and women that serve as first responders, be they law enforcement, firefighters, or emergency services. It is also dedicated to all the brave men and women that serve in our military from the birth of this glorious nation through today and into our hopeful future. And we dedicate to each and every one of them this song by Todd Allen Herndon, My Name is America. May God bless each and every one.
Born in the grip of oppression, I fought for my liberty. I paid with the blood of my people. Freedom has never been free. Now my door's always open to dreamers and friends. When I'm attacked, I protect and defend, because my name is America. I stand proud and free. My name is America. Don't tread on me. I cannot be broken. I cannot be shamed. gave it to me. They believe in the virtues I stand for, my respect for humanity. Now I'm challenged by tyrants who envy my power, but their vicious deeds become my finest hour. Because my name is America, I stand proud and free. My name is America.
Your show now, press 1. To hear important instructions, press 2. To start your show now, press 1. To hear important instructions, press 2. To start your show now, press 1. To hear important instructions, press 2.
Thank you for using Blog Talk Radio. Goodbye.
For those who will harm me, I'll face without fear, but I'll always stay proud and free. I'm America, don't tread on me. I'm America, yes, America is my name. Is my
All right, we're back. You're here listening to Southern Sense live on Blog Talk Radio, SHR Media, Lone Star, Daily News, iTunes, Stitcher, Spreaker, YouTube, Facebook, all the heck with it. Just go to the name of the show, put a dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. I'm your hostess with the least mostest, the Radio Chick-A-Dee, Annie, along with my guest co-host, former Congressman and hopefully one day Senator from the great state of Florida, the free state of Florida, Ted Yoho. Good afternoon, Ted, and we're back. I'm waiting for our guest to call in. We had a little problem calling him into the show, so hopefully he'll get the message and call into us very shortly. He's got a great movie out called Capital Punishment that he did with Nick Searcy. And we've had Nick Searcy on the show in the past. He had worked with other conservative producers and does absolutely great work. He did this documentary about January 6th, what really happened that day and what the media is not showing you. He gave the true behind the scenes. And he does a little bit commentary in it, and it's awesome. So I'm hoping that he will call in. And yes, he is. So let's welcome to the show. And I have to apologize for the switchboard screw up since I don't have my normal co-host with us. I want to welcome Chris Burgard, the director of the documentary Capital Punishment, which he did with Nick Searcy. Good afternoon, Chris. And I want to let you know my guest co-host today is former Congressman from the great state of Florida, Ted Yoho. So we're going to have a blast here.
Hey, Chris. Great to have you.
Thank you. Thank you, guys. Outstanding. Thank you so much. I was calling in. I was getting really weird stuff, so finally connected. Thank you for having me on your show.
Yeah, because the number I was calling you from, my switchboard dropped me as I'm talking to you. Like, he can't hear me. Why can't? So I'm glad I was able to get through one way or another. We are resourceful here. I may not be able to speak, but we're resourceful. I actually watched the documentary last night while I was doing my notes. And I'm glad that you and Nick were able to get behind the scenes and actually show a lot of the things that I was hearing was getting ready to happen 2 weeks prior to January 6th. I was getting people let me know, hey, Antifa and Black Lives Matter are parking vans and putting stuff in certain areas that have Trump memorabilia in it, so they look like Trumpers. But no one was paying attention. How come little old me in the corner of South Carolina knew about that and not the Capitol Police? A lot of questions here.
Well, because you're aware
I'm sure
the truth is out there. Yeah, I'm sorry, Congressman. Go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
No, I was just agreeing with Annie that stuff is out there. I mean, and they don't do anything about it. You know, it's just they get to do their free press and free speech, but don't be a conservative and do it. So go ahead.
Yeah, you've seen the film now, so you understand, and you saw retired generals and three-letter professionals explain how January 6th was years in the making. You saw the Zoom call that Milley infiltrated that showed these people planning this months ahead of time. And it wasn't just far-left activist groups. As you saw in that Zoom call, it was members of our own government and also federal employees that work in intelligence services. This is an operation, and in an operation, you have to control the information. So that's why when you see truth and you put it out there, why isn't it going anywhere? Why isn't the mainstream media picking up? It's because that's not the narrative they want to put out.
No.
And people need to be really aware. This isn't just some random protest that got out of hand. This is a captured operation. This was a lot of resources, a lot of timing, and a lot of planning went into January 6th.
Absolutely, absolutely. And, you know, we've got the January 6th, quote, riot, insurrection, or whatever the media wants to call it, but they don't talk about the 633 Black Lives Matter riots that raged across the nation over a 2-year period. How many people were killed, how many businesses destroyed, how many lives destroyed. And yet, we have 2 people killed on January 6th, and both females that were on the protest side, unarmed, but we don't hear about that.
Well, from our research when we were doing the movie, I don't think the operation went as they wanted. I believe they wanted 100 dead people like they got in Ukraine in 2014. And it was the overlap and the players that were there on the 6th that were also in Ukraine during that revolution is something that needs to be investigated by people above my pay grade.
Yeah. Now, I was watching...
That's a very good point. Go ahead, Annie.
No, I was watching a lot of the people that you interviewed, and it's like, okay, I've had Evan Sayed at my Tea Party meetings, okay, and I'm going down the list, and I'm saying, wow, you got the A-list of people to talk about this, including Louis Gohmert, your co-worker there, Ted.
Right.
And Evan said something that we have been saying all along. Their main goal is to change the narrative, and the best way they can change the narrative is change how we use words. We understand justice as something, but when, as he said, you put the word social in front of it, you've got a whole different meaning. And we have been seeing our language get bastardized over and over and over again. But this is a tool.
Well, that's part of the information war. No, it's a tool. In any psyop, this is what you do. You have to control the language, control the narrative. Just like, look at the border. You know, illegal alien is the proper term, but they somehow made it feel like you're racist if you say illegal alien. That's a proper legal term. And it got changed to immigrants. And then now it's non-documented border crossers. You own the language, you own the narrative, and that's how you win the debate.
Right.
People, I mean, Ted, you've seen you've seen it all over. I mean,
sure have.
Language.
Well,
Washington
they're political refugees now. They're not immigrants or illegals. They're political refugees. And you know, if you've got just let me drop back because you said this was a very orchestrated movement, the January 6th. I can't tell you how orchestrated it was. I call it an orchestrated cabal to subvert our constitutional republic. I was telling Annie, and I've said this before, I was in a hearing, and it was about 1.5 to 2 years before the January 20th election, and I was the only Republican in the room. It was through my Foreign Affairs Committee, and it was on white national supremacy, the biggest threat to our country. And there were the agencies in there, the FBI, NSA, CIA, and they were trying to convince us that white national supremacy was worse than ISIS, was worse than anything that we faced as a nation. And when I questioned them, they said, "Oh no, you're kind of being silly." So I shut up for 45 minutes. They went through all these things that were happening, and I had questioned them. Give me an example. And it was Timothy McVeigh was the first one. Then the the Charlottesville, where the guy went in there and shot up the African American church, and then one synagogue. And I said, this is bigger than. Let's start with Japan. Pearl Harbor. Let's start with the World Trade Center. Then the 9/11, and then you had the Pulse nightclub in Orlando. You had San Bernardino, Fort Hood, and Pensacola. Those are all radical Islamic terrorists. But they're telling me this is the biggest threat. And when I got done listening to them, I said, "You guys are scaring the hell out of me." And they said, "Why?" And I said, "I'm a 67-year-old white guy. I'm a grandfather. I believe in the Constitution. I say the Pledge of Allegiance. I supported Trump. I was a part of the Tea Party wave. And I feel like I'm on your list." And they started laughing and said, "Oh, don't be silly." I said, "Silly? I'm just reiterating what you've told me for the last 45 minutes. Now fast forward to January 6th, and then a little after January 20th, Biden said that the biggest threat to our country is white national supremacy. Christopher Wray from the FBI, about a month later, said the very same thing. So this goes back to what you were saying. This is a very orchestrated cabal that's been years in the making."
Well, and it's so. Thank you, Congressman. You just heard it from he was in the belly of the beast, and this is something we see over and over. You see them create a narrative, create a problem, and then we get punished for it. You may remember a few years back during the Obama administration, 95% of all weapons that the cartels are using to do violence were coming from American gun stores and Walmarts. That was an absolutely false narrative. Yep, but they pushed that because, yes, this is if you understand political warfare, if you understand asymmetrical warfare, you understand that you have to have this propaganda to push the narrative, and you have to have, as the Congressman said, the cabal or the deep state working in tandem with the media, with the universities, and that's what we're seeing here. It's controlling the narrative.
Now, I will then blow the minds of both of you there, because I say this goes back far deeper than you think, because if you remember, there used to be about 10 years ago reports of CARE going out and training the FBI, the ATF, various law enforcement agencies. But who is behind CARE but the Muslim Brotherhood? Okay, now who is tied in as an associate member to the Nation of Islam, Louis Farrakhan, listed on their website? CARE and the Muslim Brotherhood, which is then tied into Hamas, which is now tied into the drug cartels that are bringing over these drugs and human trafficking and weapons. And oh, by the way, China now has a huge foothold in the Middle East, because when we gave up Afghanistan, we opened the door to a wealth of oil and precious metals China now has access to, which leads you from Afghanistan to Pakistan to Turkestan into Iraq, Iran, and of course. So now China can control what is going on with Muslim extremists. They can now help control their war pot, and China, through going through the Confucius schools here, controlling Hollywood, controlling major corporations, and now has a foothold in our stock market, which they were given just recently. Prior to that, it was illegal for Chinese companies to be exchanged on our stock market. So you've got China and the Islamic terrorists and extremists joining forces. And oh, by the way, they're making friendships with Russia. And who trained Hamas and Hezbollah? Oh, gee, wasn't it Moscow underneath the communist regime? We've got ourselves a glorious triangle that is now killing our nation. Did I scare you yet?
So you've touched on something that is so important, and you have to understand the threat. And when you put together the dots in the matrix, I worked with the Team B guys. There was a DOD task force that General Jerry Boykin helped put together that was tracking exactly what you're saying. Some really good people in there. John Guandolo, Rich Higgins, Stephen Coughlin. And I was seeing, working the border at that time, jihadis coming through West Texas. And the administration was doing everything they could to cover it up and discredit guys like me and say it wasn't happening. Meanwhile, the Team B guys were showing how, when we had the Hamas Holy Land Foundation trial, CARE and various individuals were unindicted co-conspirators coming out of that trial. And the Obama administration not only stopped the investigation into the jihadi movement, but they took specific people from there and put them into the government as advisors and onto the staff. This is infiltration, and this is on many, many levels. And again, if you understand asymmetric warfare, you understand what's being done.
So you mean someone like Ibu Patel, who became the czar of religion under Obama? And oh, by the way, he was put down as a moderate, but has direct ties into Cairo and the Muslim Brotherhood. An imam who was trying to do this seminar of love thy Muslim neighbor at one of our local Unitarian churches didn't like the fact I had Quran in hand, and I challenged him until one of the progressives stood up and told me to sit the F down.
Yeah. And the people that tell you to and the people that are yelling at you are the same people that haven't read the Quran, haven't read the Hadith, haven't read The Way of the Traveler. And if they did, they would understand more what's going on. But the overall thing is these are all isms that are being used to take down the United States of America. And it's what Stalin told us that they were going to do over 60 years ago. And, you know, the enemy of my enemy is my friend. That's why you see all these different forces working together. And it's happening so slow. Now it's actually happening faster, and people are starting to go, wait a minute, this doesn't work. But for the last several decades, it was happening so slow that people weren't paying attention to it. Critical race theory. That was something that the Russians tried to put into our psyche, you know, back 40, 45 years ago. Not even farther than that. And we're nice people. We like to treat everybody well. We don't believe people are going to try to come in and hurt our way of life, but it's actually been going down. And I kind of think like we're living, there's two things. The Chinese have a saying, may you live in interesting times. It's both a blessing and a curse. So that pops in my head several times a day, as does examples of conspiracy theories that are becoming the new spoiler alerts.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just crazy. That's what's going on.
Well, on my show page,
and I really think if
I just wanted to mention that
people see capital punishment.
Yeah.
Go ahead, ma'am. Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, because I was talking about the connection of China and Islam, Benjamin Smith was kind enough, after I interviewed him, send me this map where he redrew it. I put it up on the show page, so those listening or watching on Facebook, on YouTube, on all the other places, LinkedIn and whatever I have it restreamed at, will see this map that I'm talking about. And yeah, it is kind of scary here, guys. But go ahead, as you're starting to say.
You're talking about Ben Smith, the former Navy SEAL?
Yep.
Ben's a good guy. If you see capital punishment, and capital punishment right now is the most censored movie in America. I was the main content creator for Breitbart for 3.5 years. Yes, it is, sir. When I was at Breitbart, I had to deal with the algorithms every day. You put out a video, it gets 6 to 8 million views. You put out a sequel to it the next day, it would get 30,000. Okay, what do we do to trigger the algorithm? Why are they stepping on this video? This film, it's been out since last Thanksgiving, and the censorship we saw on this was unreal. It got great reviews, but you try to find the reviews, you try to find the movie, and you couldn't find it on Google. They stomped on it that hard. People would put it on their social media. Hey, you got to go see this movie, and their posts would be deleted. We didn't know when the movie came out that what they were going to do to President Trump, and this movie exonerates President Trump. So it's funny. We made the movie that exonerated President Trump before they even started raiding Mar-a-Lago or bringing charges against him. We put Liz Cheney, as you saw in that opening scene in the movie, we put that in for humor. We edited that scene where she's interrogating my partner Nick for being there on January 6th. Who would have known that 6 months later, the real life version of the January 6th hearings would be even more absurd, and she would be even funnier. I mean, It's insane. It's insane how spot on this movie was. And the neat thing about it is when people see how horrible it's been going, when you see 4 and 7-year-old children flashbanged in the United States of America, in California, when you see 12-year-old girls dragged out in the cold in handcuffs, and their parents weren't even in the Capitol building that day, you just know that's wrong. When you see Coy Griffin, who is thrown into solitary confinement for 3 weeks, the first 9 days in America, in solitary confinement, he doesn't even get a phone call to his family or his attorney for praying at the Capitol. These are things that shouldn't be happening in the United States. And when progressives, when liberals see this film, or people think they're progressives, but they're still Americans, they see this film, they don't cry when Ashley Babbitt dies. They cry when her dog dies. And then they get really angry because it's like they realize if they're lying to me about this, what else have I been lied to? And it drops the scales from their eyes. So it's the way we've been attacked, and this film has been jumped on is it's just simply insane.
Yeah, it's
fear.
It's a very, very powerful documentary, and there's several things that really flipped me out because I was watching the police response. You had one half the Capitol where they were battling the people, the other half they had rope lines, opened up the barriers and let them in. And when I was watching this, and Ted, you know I'm talking from experience, when we responded to a massive crowd, we knew there was going to be a large crowd. We had operation buses. They bussed troops from Brooklyn, Bronx, Queens, Staten Island, Manhattan. And, of course, the first 2 boroughs they put at the front line was us from Brooklyn and those from Bronx. We had our riot gear ready. You know, we were at standby. And 9 times out of 10, thankfully, nothing happened. But the few times there were, we had backup behind us. We had troops at the ready. I didn't see any of that at the Capitol. No, where were the Capitol superiors? You know, where were the commanders?
Well, then there's the article today about the National Guard again, how Trump asked Pelosi to do that. And the guy that was with Capitol Hill Police, he's testified that said they asked at least 6 times for the Capitol Hill Police. Paul Irving, who was the sergeant at arms, served at the will of the Speaker, was denied the National Guard by Nancy Pelosi personally, over 6 times.
Yeah,
it was orchestrated, as Chris said.
Absolutely, and you see, I mean, look at the clip that CNN released today about Nancy Pelosi saying that if President Trump came to the Capitol, it would be trespassing, and she would punch him. I mean, she knew she was being filmed. She was making that. I think that might have been footage that her daughter filmed.
Was she sober?
Actually, she looks pretty sober in this. She actually does. She's not hardly slurring at all. But this is so. I mean, we saw this in real time as it was happening. I don't know if you've seen the movie, Congressman, but as we're coming from Trump's speech to the Capitol building, we're walking and we're surrounded, and I'm by people praying, by singing, and I looked to my wife and I said, "Honey, I got a bad feeling." And she says, "What are you talking about?" I said, "Look around you. There's no media around you. There's very little. There's no police presence. But where's Fox? Where's CNN?" That tells me the images of these peaceful people praying and singing and marching and laughing, no mask, aren't the images that they want to portray. That tells me that I have a bad feeling that an event is going to happen at the end of this march that's going to be what they really want to put out. Just then, Nick calls me, my buddy Nick Searcy, who was up at the Capitol building, and he said, "They've just moved the bicycle racks. The Capitol Police are letting people into the Capitol building." And I looked at my wife like I'd just been punched in the stomach. The hair stood up on my arms, and I said, "Honey, this is Honduras all over again. I saw this. It's a setup. This is a color revolution. It's a setup, and people are going to die today." And about 2.5 hours later, Ashley Babbitt was dead.
You know, I was up there January 6th. I didn't participate in that. I was up there for some other reasons. And probably 95% of the people I saw were well respected. I mean, the way they acted, the way their demeanor was, I heard no cuss words. They were carrying American flags. They were the supporters and the true patriots of this country. And, you know, if you've ever gone to any of the Tea Party rallies or a Trump rally, It was those kind of people that just had a love for this country. And I saw what you saw, and I did see some Antifa and some QAnon and Black Lives Matter, but you could tell they were there to cause trouble. And as it went over to the Capitol, I noticed that the lack of cameras were the group of people that you just described were. You know, it's like that's not what leads in news stories, and they had no desire to push that narrative.
No, if it don't bleed, it don't lead.
When you spend
That's
hundreds
right.
of hours going over this footage, you get to know the players, and you can pick out the operators. And there were different levels of operators. I mean, you had full-on professional intelligence, military-grade operatives working the crowd that day. You had the useful idiots. You had the paid operatives. You could pick them out as the card goes. And one thing it's no one talks about, is Ray Epps and those other guys did the first initial breach. It was almost like they set it up like a scene on the sidewalk there. Why were all these A-list White House reporters there instead of where the president was still speaking? How did they know to be placed there? We saw this all day long at the Capitol building. There'd be an open door, and you would have senior citizens walking in and out. You've seen the movie. We have two 74-year-old twins that go in and out of the movie. They asked the Capitol Police. They said, sure, come on in. Yet 30 feet away, there's a broken window, and there's people fighting, and there's things, and that's where all the cameras are. That was set up. That was orchestrated. That was a movie being filmed to push a narrative. I've been doing this for 17 years. I've been on and off the border for 17 years. I've been in Mexico. I've been in Central America when they tried to take down the government down there. This is the same plan. This is the same operation that happened it put the Morsi government and Muslim Brotherhood in charge in Egypt. It put before Maduro Chavez in charge in Venezuela, and it's the same thing that happened in Ukraine in 2014. The only difference is now this time it's happened here in the United States. And a color revolution.
Think of what they did to Roger Stone. How they went to Roger Stone, and CNN was already set up when the SWAT team shows up. And it's just ridiculous how they show up in numbers for, a 60-year-old, 70-year-old man that has no weapons.
It's orchestrated, guys. I'm going to tell you something, guys, that I haven't said in public before. I'm a 60-year-old award-winning filmmaker. I've never been arrested. My father was a veteran. I grew up in a law enforcement family. He went to the 109th session. He graduated the 109th session of the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. I work with law enforcement on a regular basis. I work closely with them in the border. Because I made this movie and because I told the truth, I am now the subject in a federal terrorism investigation. The FBI has come to my ranch.
I absolutely can.
Yeah.
Wow.
And think of our grand president's speech in Philadelphia with a Nazi background, saying if you're a MAGA supporter, you are an enemy of the country, basically. That the real patriots are the Antifas and the Black Lives Matter and critical race theory supporters. And they are directing that narrative, and the American people are fed up with it. I talked to a congressman today, and he said people are ready to pull up arms, and I hear it all over the country.
And that's
we don't want to do that.
No, Congressman, I will tell you firsthand, that has been their plan since the days of rage, since the BLM summers of rage. They expected white rednecks to go out with militias and go to war against BLM and Antifa. That did not happen. They expected 100 dead bodies on January 6th. That did not happen. Forces that are enemies of this country they want us to go to civil war, and we cannot do that. If they arrest President Trump, do not get your guns. No, get on your knees and start praying. But I will tell you this: I want to talk to the patriots that are in law enforcement, that are in our three-letter agencies, specifically the FBI. I know there are incredible agents in that agency that love our country. You saw what they did to Special Agent Friend. They pulled him off a pedophile task force in Florida and told him to go after J6ers, and he claimed official whistleblower status. He stood up and he said, "This isn't right," and they're punishing him for that. They're doing that because they know there's good FBI agents out there that want to do the right thing, and they're trying to step on them before they do. We need to stand up and answer the higher power. This is God, country, and the Constitution. And we all have
God,
to call
country,
that.
family.
We have
That's
to be
right.
united in that.
Well, you know, what I found
It
interesting,
sure is.
what I found interesting when they raided Derek's garage, they found a box of pocket constitutions. The Constitution now is a subversive document. Wait a minute. I'm an oath keeper. I swore, I raised my hand. I swore to uphold the Constitution of the United States and the Constitution of the State of New York. Well, I fled New York, but every single law enforcement officer swears that. Every single elected official swears that. And yet they don't even know what this document is. It's a subversive document. Heaven forbid you have that and the American flag. And this is what you talk about in the movie. And you talk about the billboards that were telling people, rat on your neighbor. What are we, back under communist Russia and China?
They pulled out the box of constitutions. For those who haven't seen the film, they pull out the box of constitutions, and they pull out the constitutions, and they film it like they just discovered 20 kilos of cocaine on a drug bust. And the reason that's so dangerous, and the reason this is so dangerous is because what you just said, all enemies, foreign and domestic, they've sworn an oath to defend the Constitution from all enemies, foreign and domestic, but they haven't read the Constitution. They're not familiar with it. So they're being told that the domestic enemies are now us. And because they're not familiar with the Constitution and our founding fathers and the documents, they're believing that. And that's how you co-opt a movement. That's how we call it a captured operation. That's what's happening here. And the Oath Keepers, you know, what you just said, Oath Keepers. Oath Keepers have been around. I was on the Tea Party tour buses back in 2009, 2010, 70 cities in 30 days.
You may have stopped at mine.
Up then, and
you may have stopped here in Beaufort, South Carolina, because we had you guys here twice. Lloyd
with
Marcus.
Amy Kramer and those guys?
Yes, Amy knows me very well.
Oh,
Amy knows me very well.
Wasn't he the nicest man? He just passed. Wasn't he just the kindest man?
Yeah, his wife was beautiful
too.
Man. Yeah. You were
Mary.
here in Beaufort, South
goodness.
Carolina, because I have that up. I have the video because I gave a speech too. I talked about 9/11. And I said, this is our 9/12. I was the one in the crazy cowboy hat.
That's a small. Well, I wear a cowboy hat every day, but it keeps the sun off my eyes when I'm working cows. But that is a small world. Well, nice to meet you, re-meet you again. Now, I'm sorry, I just lost my train of thought.
Were you the one emceeing?
Oath Keepers.
Were you emceeing?
No, ma'am. I was back then. I was filming. I was covering it for PJ Media. I had made a movie called The Border. They invited me to do their trips and to speak about the border. I'm actually back on the border now. I'm doing a 2-year project with Tom Homan, who is President Trump's news director, and we're actually premiering the pilot episode on November 1st. So, you know, the Biden administration didn't like my last movie. They're really not going to like this next one.
But my heart bleeds for him.
Good. But talk about a captured operation, Oath Keepers. You stood up and joined Oath Keepers because it's the old Constitution. You want to be around, you know, a fellowship of folks like that. Same thing with the Proud Boys. I know people from L.A. They watched twice while people were getting beat up by Antifa, and they went after Rand Paul, and now they were afraid this demonstration that innocent people would get hurt. So they joined the Proud Boys, and they went to D.C. because they want to protect people. Well, these are all captured operations. You have FBI infiltration in Antifa and to BLM. You have it on the other side into the Proud Boys, into Oath Keepers, and then they can work these groups against each other. So this is what happens in the color revolution. You have people on the left, people on the right. They go at each other, and out of the chaos, someone else grabs power. It's exactly what happened back in Kosovo. We actually had a journalist who was in Kosovo in the movie talks about it. He goes, I saw this same thing happen years ago in Europe. And it's a shame, but we're seeing a pattern here. I mean, Chris Wray stood up, and it's in the movies, Congressman. Chris Wray testifies to Congress that he saw no evidence, and anytime they say that means he hasn't denial. He saw no evidence of any anarchist, anti-government, Antifa, BLM type groups on January 6th in Washington, D.C. He actually said that with a straight face to Congress and the American people, which is very interesting because we saw them Every one of my 3-letter military buddies that was there saw them. We could pick them up in squads. We could see when they're doing the operations.
I saw them.
You saw them. We filmed them changing clothes from black bloc to MAGA stuff. They tried to get my family and I, they tried to get us to attack the police. We said no. I went to FBI units on the ground, said, hey, you got bad guys here. You want me to point them out? No. Well, they're over here trying to get us to attack the police. Do you want to take a report? No, we're good. And then Christopher Wray comes out and says they weren't there, while John Sullivan, a BLM leader, filmed himself and who is one of the orchestrators of the chaos and who just happens to be there when Ashley gets shot. Yet he filmed himself. Yet Christopher Wray, the head of the most powerful law enforcement agency on the earth, says he has no evidence of what's going on. That either says one of two things. He's purposely lying to the American people, which is he being pressured, or is he being part of the cover-up? Is he part of the plot? Or it means that he is the most ineffective leader we've ever had leading the FBI. Because that is the reality of the situation we're in. Now, you think the media would be all over something like that, such an obvious misstatement, but it's completely dropped. Why? Because the media is working in a PSYOP operation, and it's propaganda, and it's part of a operation against the American people. And that's
let me ask you this. Let me ask you this.
It's really happening.
If that's the narrative and that's their action that they're doing and it's orchestrated, what is their end result? I mean, look down the road. What are they trying to accomplish? I know destroy the constitutional republic, but what are they trying to develop?
They took over the federal government. Because here's what happened. If you look at what 2 million people, now, and I'll say 2 million people comfortably, there's retired generals who quoted the same numbers as I've been to 17 years, I've been to protests in D.C. This is by far the largest. So I know it was well over 1 million and quite possibly could have been 2 million people. Every one of those 2 million people that were there, the Trump supporters, just wanted Congress to take 10 days because all the news out, you had all these legislators saying, hey, my state is certifying results that we're not seeing. We don't agree with that. Okay, they weren't in unison. So all the people out there wanted to do was for Mike Pence to say, hey, we need to take a 10-day pause and make sure that these certified elections are really the intent of these 50 states. That's the entire thing right there. What was the result of storming the Capitol?
Exactly what they wanted.
Exactly the opposite.
Yep.
Everybody that was on record saying that they were going to vote for the 10-day pause, after they came back after that 4-hour interruption, I don't know what McConnell and McCarthy said to them, but they all did a flip. They all went to the other side. So if you look at the results were exactly what the bad guys wanted. And by being able to do that, they were able to put their guy into power.
Well, yeah, but what are they trying to accomplish with the nation?
I don't understand, Congressman. What are they trying to accomplish with the nation? Well,
yeah, what are they trying? What's their end goal of this nation? To get rid of, the amendments or the Constitution, turn it into a Marxist country, or are they going to put it under the veil of a socialist? Huh?
Absolutely. What you've just seen is first you seize control of the government, and now you take out the opposition. Anybody that sticks their head up has to be taken down, whether they're construction workers that got caught up by a captured operation and stupidly went into the Capitol because the passion, the momentum got to them, or whether they were just pastors that were there praying on the ground, or whether they're award-winning filmmakers that were capturing the whole thing on camera. These people have to be silenced in order for their narrative to go through unopposed. We've seen this before. If you know history, this is the burning of the Reichstag. This is not anything new. You talk to people in military intelligence. You talk to historians. What went down was right out of the frickin' playbook.
I agree.
Well, Chris, we're down to our last.
That's why the American
people have to
Sorry,
wake up.
ahead.
I was
I'm
going to say
done.
we're down to the last few seconds with you because this is going so fast. I welcome you to hang around because I got Kevin McGary of Every Black Lives Matter on as the next guest. If you're welcome to stay, but to let you know, I also ordered the DVD off of your website, which is hisglory.tv. People can go there, get the merchandise, Make America Talented Again hat. I've got the DVD, which I plan to play for my tea party next month. How's that sound?
Awesome. Thank you.
Good for you.
That sounds pretty darn good.
And we welcome you
Congressman,
back.
It's an honor being on with you.
Welcome you back because we got a lot more to talk about on this subject, and we'll help you pump this this film.
Thank
Chris,
you, man.
keep up the great work.
God bless her.
All right, thanks, Chris.
Take care.
All right, check out his website and the movie Capital Punishment at hisglorytv.com. Ted, want to welcome back to the show a friend of ours, Kevin McGary of Every Black Lives Matter. He's also with the Frederick Douglass Foundation, as well as half a dozen other places. He's chairman of the Frederick Douglass Foundation out of California, as well as an author, keynote speaker, a Silicon Valley professional. What else does this guy do? Good afternoon, Kevin. How are you? And welcome back.
Hey there. Thank you for having me again. I'm excited to be here. You guys have a wonderful show, by the way. That was just fascinating, hearing perspective, what's happening elsewhere. I mean, this is just crazy what we're going through right now.
Yeah, it
sure is. Welcome, Kevin.
Thank you, sir.
Well, you've been hard at work, and you're like the ever-ready bunny. Nothing stops you. Nothing keeps you down. What I did not realize, you've got an organization you work with, promise-to-America's-children.org. And the reason why I love that is because I was talking to someone from Tunnel to Towers, which has now put together a K-12 program to send out to schools and to concerned parents to teach people about 9/11, what happened and what has happened afterwards. And I'm wondering if these two can tie in together.
Yeah, I don't know. We have a lot of partners and a lot of organizations collaborate with us, love our mission, love what we're doing right now. We're fully exposing the roots of wokeism, and that's our number one goal right now. We're going around the country. We'll be in, as a matter of fact, we're starting our launch for actually providing training and certification for people who really want to understand racial unity and how to do that. We're actually providing that now. We'll be starting at the end of this month, October 29th, at Awaken Church in San Diego, one of the largest churches there, Pastor Jurgen. And so here's the thing. We have been bamboozled and hoodwinked to believe that if you have a dissenting point of view, if you happen to be to not have the paint job that I have, but a little lighter hue, and if you happen to be a Christian, that you are a white supremacist, racist, Christian nationalist, right, all of these other pejoratives. And then when you take these courses that they're kind of compulsory now in a lot of organizations where they bring in these quote unquote anti-racist trainers, then you're relegated. Basically you're set upon by the room because you happen to have a different paint job, and you become the target of everybody's ire, right? And that doesn't create unity, folks. That creates division. It creates a more hostile workforce. So what we're doing is we're saying, look, there is a way for us to recognize racism and white supremacy. We need to get to the roots of that. My latest book, Woke Up, actually fully exposes all of this. And so we need to bring out the roots of white supremacy and racism and start there. We believe that you need to raise racism, which means that raise in the construction terms is to completely demolish, implode, completely destroy existing structures. And that's what we're doing with racism. So we'll be having our training the end of this month, and it's at no charge. Anybody and everybody that comes to our training at the Awaken Church, again, you can find out more at the Every Black Life Matters website, everyblm.com. You can just go there and you'll find out more about how to register for that. But we're doing it at no charge. We're training people. We're certifying them on all of the modules that they would stay for as racial unifiers. And so when your workmates come and your supervisors come and say, hey, we need you to take Kindy's anti-racism stuff, you can say, well, look, I've already been trained by Every Black Life Matters, taking these modules. I have the certification. If you want me to take it, fine, I'll do it, because if that's part of the job, then I'll do it. But if they have to do it, then they'll be much more prepared. They'll be less traumatized because they'll understand exactly what's going on. I mean, they'll be able to laugh at the idiocy that's being taught in these purported training courses of these other guys.
That's great. That sounds good.
Well, they have always found a way. When we go after, say, for example, critical race theory being taught, they repackage it into something else, and then they call it environmental, social, and governance. And if that doesn't work, then you got the diversity, equity, and whatever the I stands for, inclusion.
Inclusion, yes. DEI, yes.
It's the same thing, just repackaged. And so they're hitting us with all these acronyms, and it's like, all right, fine. Well, CRT is not DEI. Yes, it is. ESG is not CRT or ESG. No. Yes, it is. You just look at it. They change the wording a little here and there, but it's the same exact thing over and over and over again. And the purpose is to divide and conquer. Now, we were talking about this with our previous guest in his film, and that's what they do. They separate us into different groups. And the white females here, the white males there, the white homosexuals here, the white transgenders there. Then they pit them against every other race. So because you're white, you have to feel bad. But you're higher on the totem pole, and you're a little more respected if you're under this category. But if you're a white male or a full white heterosexual female, then you're on the bottom. You're bad. Your race, you were just simply born race. Wait a minute. I don't understand that. I'm born an innocent child. I'm baptized in the eyes of God and washed of all my sins, even though I'm too young to even know that I had any committed. And then I say, does God make a mistake? He chose me to be here at this time for a purpose. It's up to me to find out what that purpose is. That doesn't make me a racist. It just makes me what I do with my life means something more. So if I can move forward and
That's
say,
exactly right.
what good can I do? What productive things can I do for people around me? How can I help? That's more important than what the color of my skin is.
Absolutely, it is. And this is the thing that's so corrosive about all of this stuff is it's all based in Marxism, okay? And what a lot of people don't realize is that Marxism in its totality is holistically racist and white supremacist. So if you're a Marxist, you shouldn't go around beating your chest, because in this book, I fully demonstrate the roots of Marxism. He was a horrible racist and white supremacist. I mean, Marx was just wretched. And so what we have to do is help expose this stuff, help educate people on what's really going on. Because as you say, I mean, CRT, ESG, DEI, trans, all of these various movements are part of the woke come under, if you will, the arc of wokeism. And they're all of it's literally based in white supremacy and racism. And that's not me just because they do ad hominems to anybody, any dissenting voice. That's just not me trying to, oh, okay, you're actually the one. No. This is matter of fact. This is actually fact-based. And so this is not an ad hominem or pejorative. This is just, hey, this is what it is, guys. Literally, if you're a Marxist, you are the white supremacist and racist, period. Hard stop, end of story. Got all the facts to back it up. I mean, we just look at who Marx is and what he said and what he did and what his intentions are. I mean, it's very, very clear. So, and so this book, Woked Up, gives you all of the literal private letters and all of the notations and everything that both Marx and then his mentor, who mentored he and Engels into their mindset, and that would be Charles Darwin. All of their, horrible, demented ways are fully exposed in this book, and I would encourage everybody to just read it. I mean, it's there.
I'm gonna have to get that book. That sounds very interesting.
Yeah. We take it from the root all the way through modern day. We show exactly where the intersections are with the thinking of these notorious people, and you literally, if you're a Marxist, even if you're a pro-abortionist, believe it or not, abortion itself is rooted in white supremacy and racism. Now, some of your people would say, oh, come on, you're taking it a bit too far. Let me just give you a very quick story. I know you guys probably have other
things. That's a fact.
But let me just give you a quick story. Yeah, so here's the deal. So Darwin, he had a younger cousin named Francis Galton. Francis Galton was a brilliant statistician. Okay, he was really, really good. He was one of the first pioneers of statistics. Okay, so he was doing his work, and he said, "Look, I'm looking at ethnic patterns, population growth, and all of that affecting the globe, and I see all of these other ethnicities are actually populating at a much higher and faster rate than we supremacists, because again, Darwin came out and he says, look, whites have a higher intellectual capacity and better, much more resourceful. We are supreme." So his younger cousin said, look, they're populating much faster than we are, and so we're going to be in trouble in a few years. So why don't we come up with a way that we can scientifically justify exterminating folks? So they are the fathers of eugenics, who literally came up with eugenics. And that eugenics means well-born. This is what they said. Eugenics means well-born. All of you who are well-born, you're fine. But those of you who are not, which would be all these other ethnicities, they can be summarily exterminated. And this is the justification that Hitler, Stalin, Lenin, Mao, Pol Pot, all of them pointed to Darwin for the extermination of people. Okay, so when it came to America, of course, Margaret Sanger was a eugenicist, and she started sterilizing, black women and all that stuff. And then she says, look, we need to start sterilizing. We need to start actually exterminating blacks because they're subhuman. They have less intellectual capacity, whatever. They're weeds, they're scourge, all this kind of stuff. So literally, abortion today, in its current manifestation, is built upon white supremacy and racism, and there is no other way to have another narrative about it. It's hard stop, end of story. That's why it's here, because Darwin and his cousin said, we want to exterminate all other ethnicities. So that's the reality.
That's pretty much in a nutshell. And then you think of the eugenics program that this country ran through the government. If you had a birth defect or they deemed you unfit, they were sterilizing people in this country. Absolutely. That's why they did it. And so the whole point is look, if you're an abortionist, if you're a Marxist, which all diehard leftists are, guess what? You cannot escape the fact that you are a white supremacist and a racist. You can't escape it. You may as well just hold your hand up and say, look, I believe in Marx and I believe in abortion. So guess what? I am a white supremacist and racist. Just wear it proudly, because that's who you are. It's inescapable. It really is. But yet they throw that on the other side, saying you're a white supremacist and racist when they actually are. I mean, they're great at twisting the narrative. They're great at twisting it, but we haven't had facts on our side. Even Bill Federer, when he read my book, if you know, Bill Federer is incredible historian, modern day historian, and he says, "Look, Kevin, this really connects the dots in ways that I had never even imagined." He thought it was just an incredible work, so much so he wanted to do the foreword, and he did that. So anyway, the point is that look, we all need to be woke up about wokeism. We all need to be trained on real racial unity. We at Every Black Life Matters are doing it, and we encourage everybody to just come and find out more about us, everyblm.com. And, you get all the information you want. You can sign up for our upcoming training in San Diego. If you're in Southern California, you need to be there. It's free. It's no charge. So just come and take the training, get certified, and at least you have that, as part of your, professional development or whatever you want to call it.
Well, the wokeism also is
that's great to know.
Wokeism not just going after racial divide, they're going after the sexual divide. And the best way they can do that is brainwashing the little kids. And this is why Hitler created kindergarten, because he knew if he could get the kids young enough, by the time they're 6 or 7, he's got them for the rest of their life. But you and I had fun the last time we were on the show when you wrote the article about what Paul Harvey had done in a broadcast in 1965. And this is exactly what they're doing now. They're going after the kids.
Exactly right. They're exactly right. So we're using Hitler's playbook. And, we have these do-gooders on the left and all these. Oh, no, we don't, but they are. They're using Hitler's playbook. They understand how this stuff works. The bottom line is this, folks. They're trying to make the next generation God-resistant. if children grow up thinking that God makes mistakes, they're going to be that much more difficult to reach when they get older and they can actually make that decision for themselves. And when we say, look, he made a mistake with your gender or your friend's gender, God didn't know what he was doing, there is no such thing as God, then that begins to cement very, very early. They're going to be very hard to reach. And so this is a generation of God-resistant children. Just like we had child-resistant caps on our medicines, this is a God-resistant generation, and they're doing it on purpose, by design, so they could, essentially make sure that these children in this next generation are diehard Marxists, as opposed to having any intentionality towards faith.
Well, there's also another evil reason why they're doing this. For every child they convert into transgender, every child they mutilate means one more child of an ethnic or socioeconomic background they feel does not fit into their eugenics program. So now you don't have to worry about fighting about abortion. How can you have kids when you no longer have the organs to function to produce a family or children? So now only the children that will be born are the children they choose. The only children are allowed to produce are the ones they choose as being ethnically clean. This is another version of it, folks. That's all it is. They couldn't do it purely through abortion. They couldn't do it through the KKK. Now they're finding another way by mutilating and destroying generations of children now to prevent generations of opponents in the future.
Absolutely. Couldn't say it better. Yeah, that's a great summary.
Well put.
Well,
yes. So we have a lot of work to do, folks. I'm encouraging everybody, please continue to follow us, pray for us, go to our website, become a partner, everyblm.com, and sign up if you're in Southern California for our upcoming training. We'll be doing these around the country after we launch this first one later this month. And so we want to make sure that everybody who's moral, clear-thinking, God-fearing, have the ability to actually, stand on truth and do something about it. I also encourage you to go get my book, Woke Up. You can get it on Amazon, WOKED up, McGary, and then it'll come up. Wonderful, wonderful comments, and it's all 5-star. It's just everybody's really got great things to say about this book.
No, I think I was supposed to put something up too, and I forgot. So I got it on my Kindle right now because I have it on the Kindle, which means I read it and we talked about it. I just forgot to put my comments on there. I'll do that. I promise.
Please go get your comments on there. I'd love to have it.
And we were talking about the Paul Harvey, and I just can't resist because we had so much fun with it. But this, unfortunately, if it wasn't so true, it would be truly funny. But he nailed it. And he said, if I were the devil, I would confuse children about their God-given biological sex by affirmatively teaching children gender is a personal choice, as opposed to God ordained.
Yeah.
With over 100 plus gender choices to ferment their confusion and rebellion against God's natural order and nature. I just love doing that. Paul Harvey.
You do that so well, Annie. That is very...
You do.
You cracked me up.
I'm having a flashback there, Annie.
No, I'm not a transgender.
Somebody told me, and when I read this the other day, that the belief in God or Christianity is at an all-time low in our country. And so they're winning on that.
So that's one of the outcomes that has been proven the world over. Wherever socialism or Marxism or communism is accepted and more accepted in society, then we see more and more acceptance of a lack of faith. The faith starts to take a big hit. So, and that's because the number one goal of Marx was to dethrone God. So infused in all of his economic theories and social theories, et cetera, his philosophies, is an undermining of faith. It's an undermining of God. So the more we believe and adopt and embrace socialism, Marxism, communism, the less, the less relevant, so to speak, God becomes. And so, and this is a pattern consistent throughout Europe, consistent throughout the world over. This is how it happens.
Yeah, throughout history, yeah. Sure is.
Yeah.
Now I have a question here because
So
we're
this
talking
is why
about,
we got to punch back. We got to push back, folks.
well, this is my question is now, do you think we're going to become so woke that eventually the people themselves are going to realize that they've been placed under a yoke and fight back? What about these children who have been mutilated? By the time they reach adulthood and realize that their bodies and their lives have been destroyed because of what they've been taught in school, suddenly realize they were told the wrong things all along? Do you think there will be a pushback?
I think there will be. I think there's a wake-up call coming sooner rather than later. There's a lot of trans people who are now coming out and saying they made the decision too early. They're trying to detrans. Of course, the media is trying to silence those voices, but more and more of those young folks are coming out and saying, "Look, this is really bad. Don't do it." So, you know, and of course, you have folks that are waking up, you know, via my book and others about the whole Marxist thing, which, you know, that's all this stuff is. All the craziness is all Marxism. And so the more we wake up, the more we'll be ready to combat this stuff as it continues to encroach on our family, our communities, and our places of worship. So I think it will be a turnaround. It'll probably come sooner rather than later. I don't think it's going to see its final net effect, which means that if it were, that means the United States would be fully Marxist or fully communist. And I don't think we're going to see that anytime soon. We're certainly trying to go that direction, but I don't foresee that happening over the next year or so. I think we'll start to see some correction on some of these things sooner.
Let's hope so. You know, Andy,
Yes.
You brought up about the direction that it's going. I don't know if I'm allowed to promote another book from another author. Is that all right?
Oh, that's perfectly fine. We have no ego here. You know that.
It's by
That's right.
Michael Anton, and it's called The Stakes, America at a Point of No Return. And the left, the Marxists, they get all these divisive groups, or they create them, thinking that as they go and get more in power and the other side goes away, the conservatives, they think these groups that help them, the Antifas, the Black Lives Matter, are just going to fall in line with them. But what his book goes on and says that group goes after the left elite, the liberals, and destroys them too. So it's a no-win situation, and we do have to come back to this. And it's like the previous caller, and Kevin, I think you're the same way. You're saying we need to get down on our knees as a nation and humble ourselves.
Yeah, absolutely. That's number one. If we can start to do that and do good with that, then that'll help really turn things around. We are in a real moral and faith decay, and we must begin to be contrite before the Lord and humble ourselves, and that's really the key.
All right.
That doesn't fit into the narrative of the me ideal. It's me first, I exist, and everyone else is just ancillary to me. What I feel and what I want is more important than what you feel or you may need. And you see people, recently we had the stabbing of that firefighter in New York City. All she was doing was just stood outside, and people are walking past, driving past. No one stopped to help. It's a flashback to Kitty Genovese back in the 1970s in Manhattan, where the whole entire apartment building watched her being raped and murdered, and no one picked up the phone to simply dial 911.
Wow.
Yeah, it's so horrible what we're seeing, not only in New York, but throughout all of our major cities. We see a lot of police force being targeted and actually, you know, set up really by these domestic violence calls. We had several of them yesterday, but I think over the past week we've had 12 police officers maimed or killed, 12 plus. Yeah, within the past week. So it's actually accelerating. It's getting worse. We need to do more to protect our law enforcement. Yes, we do have some bad actors in some of these in law enforcement, but those are compared to the overwhelming number of law enforcement officers that are on the street trying to help protect us. The nut jobs within that agency are really a non-factor. We must, you know, really try to stand up for all law enforcement and get the crazy ones out of the force. But to just say that all of them now are categorically a problem, so therefore we can kill them, is really, really horrendous.
Well, you notice that
Yeah.
if a black young man dies at the hands of police, it doesn't matter what the racial backup or biological sex of that officer is. You're racist. It doesn't matter that you're Hispanic
Yeah.
or black or Jewish or whatever. It doesn't matter, male or female. You're bad. Simply because you're a cop and
Yeah.
someone died because of something you did. And we have this one female sergeant
Exactly.
doing time, was it in Chicago, because she accidentally grabbed the wrong weapon. I don't understand how that happens, but it happened. Accidents do happen. You're in a moment of high adrenaline, and now her life is destroyed. Her family is destroyed. But that doesn't matter.
Yeah.
That doesn't matter. If it doesn't feed the purpose of Black Lives Matter and Antifa and all those on the other side that want that narrative to explode, to achieve their political and social goals, go for it. Use it. Never let a good crisis go to waste.
Yeah, exactly. And the other thing that's really a real telling and sobering reality about these police officers that are being set upon and being slaughtered is the overwhelming majority of those are actually minority officers. But to your point, Annie, people don't care about that. They just say, "Oh, you're a police officer. We can kill you."
Right.
And it's just horrible. These families now are grief-stricken because they're, the father of the home or the son or whatever are now gone, and they have to try to pick up the pieces. So it's just we're in a bad way right now. We got bad leadership with double-digit inflation. He's making the working class and the working class poor suffer under the iron fist of green energy policies that are just utterly destroying all of our industries, and including making our inflation much, 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 much worse. We've got a compromised FBI and CIA. Man, I tell you what, we need to pray this one through. We're in a bad way right now. Only God can help us. It's really
we really are. And going back to your organization, when I read that, I said, well, I don't know if I agree with that. But then after I read your opening statement or your letter there, I said, this makes perfect sense. And you brought up Margaret Sanger, and the African-American population is staying and hovering around 12 to 14% in this country, yet they account for the majority of the abortions. Where would that population be if we weren't doing this? Because you're seeing the Hispanics outpace them as far as numbers. Yep. The Asians are gaining, the Muslims are gaining, but the African Americans are going either static or going backwards, and it's because of the abortion issue, in addition to the social programs that Lyndon Johnson brought in, the Great New Deal or the Great Society, where it split up the traditional African American family, which had a stronger family unit than most other ethnicities. And we've destroyed that through government programs.
Absolutely, we did. So here's the thing. We would be, to your point, we would be twice the population we are now. Literally, we've aborted half of our population. Yeah, that's the reality. We would be twice the number we are now if we didn't have these grotesque policies, okay? So the other thing is, to your point about our moniker, Every Black Life Matters, because some of your listeners may also say, I'm not so sure about that. Why are you still being divisive? So here's the thing. We're not being divisive. We're not being divisive. This is a statement of equality. What we're saying is, look, because Margaret Sanger's, actually literally put a target on all blacks' backs and put her all of her clinics within walking distance of black communities, over 90% or approximately 90% of all Planned Parenthoods are within walking distance of black community. We have been born at a level much less than other ethnicities. And all we're saying is every black life matters too, T-O-O. So it is a statement about life. It is a pro-life statement that we're making with our moniker. It is also the number one way you push back against leftists who try to get you to bow, bark, roll over, kiss the boots when they say, and salute, when they say Black Lives Matter and they try to get you to do all this craziness. You can now stand up and say, look, to me and my family, every single Black life matters. Now, does every single Black life matter to you? And then they'll slink away because they don't have a good answer for that. We've done it hundreds of times. We've encouraged people to do it. It's an incredible statement, but it's a statement of equality and not of superiority.
Well, Kevin,
Right. And there's a lot of people in Congress working against you.
well, Kevin, it is always a pleasure to have you on, and you know you're always welcome. And we've got to have you constantly come back over and over again to get the message out there. People can go to your website, learn about this, and it's everyblm.com. Kevin McGary, thank you, and God bless you for the hard work you do.
Thank you so much. Be glad to come back anytime. God bless you guys. Take care.
All right.
Take care.
Check out Kevin McGary at
Great job,
everyblm.com. Yeah, I can rack them up. We got our next guest in on the show. I want to welcome Suze Schaefer. She is the HIPAA security analyst since 2009 at arismedicalsolutions.com by simplifying HIPAA through partnership, education, and support. Suze, my guest co-host, as you know, Curtis is not with us today, is former Congressman from the great state of Florida, Ted Yoho. So welcome aboard, Suze.
Hello, Suze.
Well, Annie, thank you for having me back again. I really appreciate it. And Congressman Ted, it's nice to meet you.
Hey, same here. Look forward to having a conversation with you.
Oh, same here, because I'm from Florida as well. So we are the free state of Florida. We love
the free
it.
state of Florida. That's
Well,
right.
I'm
Yeah,
trying
we're
to
proud of that.
I'm trying to twist his arm to make sure that he runs for Senate. See if we can get him into the Senate.
That would be great.
Oh, man.
But
Well, thank you.
I just wanted to jump in here and say, because I've been listening to the entire podcast, and I truly believe everyone should see the movie Capital Punishment. I love the fact that OAN has played it several times, but I've also watched like the opening, so they talked about all the different people that have been affected by this tragedy, this travesty that they've caused for these people. And it absolutely disgusts me that we live in America and we have political prisoners still in jail in DC since January 6th. And it breaks my heart to know that some of them have committed suicide and some of them have been sentenced to jail and never even went inside. And I cannot even wrap my brain around this, and it really breaks my heart because this is not the America that I've grown up with and dearly love. And with that said, you know, I watch a lot of political movies, or not, I shouldn't say political, but I like documentaries, educational things for people to understand what has happened. And 2,000 Mules should be watched. If you can go to Frank's speech, Mike Lindell's cyber symposium from last year. And I don't know, but Candace Owens just put out a new documentary about the truth about George Floyd and the lie that we've been spoon-fed. That was just amazing. And Annie, when you spoke about the transgender people coming into adults, if you haven't seen the movie by Matt Walsh, What is a Woman? It's a must-see because it demonstrates how this agenda is being pushed. And in my opinion, you know, it's the problem I see today is not just in our academia, but it's in our medical professions. They're pushing this. And again, I almost think it's almost like big pharma is going, yes, once you have this, you're going to be on drugs for the rest of your life, and we're going to make all our shareholders lots of money. But I always say follow the money anyway. So, but yeah, I've seen
That's
quite a
an
bit.
interesting point. I haven't thought about that.
Oh, yeah. Big Pharma has their hand out, and we could see this with the COVID vaccines. We're finding all the side effects and everything coming up, the number of people that have actually truly died from the vaccines. One of my friends, retired, again, NYPD, lost his 10-year-old grandson because of the vaccine.
Is that right?
Yeah, and look at how much
That's a
Pfizer
shame.
and Merck and all the others are raking in hand over fist over an experimental vaccine. And what happens to our federal law that says if it's experimental, it cannot be mandated? And yet, People are losing their jobs and people are dying because of a mandate on the vaccine. And in the end, you follow
and you know
the
what,
money.
Annie, absolutely. And the other thing you have to understand, too, is they could not have forced this emergency use garbage on us, but they did because that's why they wouldn't allow the doctors to use their own medicine. And I don't want to say it on the air because then they're going to try to censor us,
Right.
but we all know that the medical professionals saved thousands and thousands of lives during the pandemic, okay? And those very physicians that used their medical plan that worked are no longer allowed to treat the patients as they see fit because now it's being controlled by government regulations. I don't know if you've heard this, but in California, the doctors are no longer allowed to even mention about ivermectin as a treatment for COVID. Otherwise, they could have their medical license stripped. This is government controlled health care. This is not, I mean, when I go to my doctor, I trust he knows how to treat me. I mean, that's what they go to school for. And again, I went way back to the beginning, follow the money, because the big pharma, all of them could not have made any money if they had allowed these other medications to be used. And so now they use the emergency use and they're still pushing. And to your point, you know, it's not supposed to be mandated. And look at how many people were forced to get the jab or lost their jobs. It's just, I just can't wrap my brain around that either.
Well, I have to hand it to the Attorney General here in my state of South Carolina. Happens to be a friend of mine, the son of my former senator. Anyway, he put forward where he wrote a memorandum and said his office will not prosecute any doctor that uses alternative treatments, including the ivermectin. They will not prosecute.
Okay. Good.
That's what.
But see, California.
I'm sorry. I was just going to say.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
23 attorney generals across the United States that are conservative attorney generals. If once they start that ball rolling, people are going to flock to their states to get the treatment. Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say, but California, I don't know what happened to California. I mean, I lived there for a short time in the 80s, but it's just definitely not the place I would want to return to. Actually, it was the 90s. And the 90s I would live there, but it's just not the same.
It's not.
But I love the fact that I live in Florida. I think Governor DeSantis is doing a wonderful, wonderful job in protecting our workers, our businesses, and our health care. Yes, absolutely.
Now
he sure is. He's doing a good job.
Now, you work specifically with the HIPAA Act, and there's always ways around it one way or another, as we found with the mask and vaccine mandates. I don't know if you and I had the conversation last year when they had my husband and I kicked out of the hospital when he was going for tests for his final surgery. He had about a month and a half before he passed away. And I was told by the security guard, because I could not medically wear a mask, I had to leave. I don't know if you remember that, because...
Yes, I do. I do remember that.
And we got the hospital policy changed.
Good for you. Yeah. But this is what a lot of people don't understand about HIPAA. HIPAA is between the doctors and the patient. And I'm going to call it a plandemic still, because I still believe it was planned, if you go back and watch some of the other things. But when you listen
I would love
to this,
to talk to you about that further, because I am with you.
Oh, I'm like I said, I joke around. I don't have a life. This is what I do. I have to go and research everything. But
I interrupted you, and you had a train of thought you were on. So.
Oh no, that's all right. What happens is when it comes to emergencies and everything else, our privacy rights get thrown out the window, and HIPAA gets thrown out as well, unfortunately. The HIPAA is guided by the federal government for privacy. It's the patient's privacy rights. And of course, the security rule covers the security to make sure that doctors know how to, protect electronic data. But, when we look at when we had this pandemic, and they now changed the rules because once it becomes an emergency, then our government officials have the right to share our information with anyone whom desire. Again, they say within reason, but if you read the fine print, I mean, well, that's not even fine print, but they can share our information with other government agencies. And that brings me to China. We all know that China is invading the United States, and they already probably have most of our information already because our government, in my opinion, has shared it because of this pandemic. Do I have facts on that? No. But if you look at the big picture and of everything that's going on, I truly believe that with all my heart.
Well, that's one of the reasons why
the sad part.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's one of the reasons why I won't use a DNA test. And anyone that says, "Oh, I want to do the DNA test," look at Ancestry or 123andMe. Hello, China now owns those companies, and one of the ones they don't own, they've hacked. They've got your DNA. How do you think they made this pandemic?
Absolutely. Once they know your weak points, then they can create viruses and things like that to attack. And I do, again, follow the money. It's who's making money. And, but when I go back to our healthcare workers and stuff, I just have to say, I feel for my clients because, I deal with HIPAA compliance. That's what we do. And they just really want to care for their patients. But they're required to maintain so much documentation to keep the government at bay. And HIPAA, a lot of people don't realize how much HIPAA has changed over the last few years. And there's a lot more coming out. I mean, we've got, oh my goodness, information blocking, good faith estimates, no surprise billing. They're coming out with now cybercrime reporting. I mean, they want doctors' offices to be able to report ransomware and things like that within 24 to 48 hours, which I understand why a lot of this stuff is good, but it's time consuming. And then people complain, well, my doctor doesn't spend enough time with me. Well, they're spread so thin as it is. And, and then they have to worry about these companies that preach nothing but doom and gloom. Are they really selling them something they need, or are they trying to capitalize on the new rules? And it's, my heart breaks for them. And that's why, again, my clients love me because we cut through the BS and say, this is what you need, here it is. And don't listen to these other people, but I want to change gears for just a second. Because some of the other people, the guests you've had on, we're talking about, the crimes and how the Democrats, how divided our country is. And what breaks me again is the fact that, the violence and the crime has been incited by Democrats. You look at what Nancy Pelosi says, Chuck Schumer, right. Oh, Maxine Waters is classic, Yeah, and then you got Elizabeth Warren, Cory Booker, all of them, and they say, oh, they want to punch Trump in the face. I want to take him outside the tool shed. But
Joe Biden said that too.
Yes, absolutely. And so I look back going, but wait a minute. The other gentleman said, they were waiting for the redneck Republicans to come out and start fighting. But they don't understand that, I think the conservative, we have values, we have standards, and that's not the way we do things. I do believe we do need to come back to God and start praying. But at the same point, we need to come together as a party because the Democrats are stuck like glue, whether they believe in their words or not. So I believe the Republican Party needs to come back together if we're going to defeat this evil, and it is definitely good against evil.
Yeah, what I'm finding here...
We are in that war right now.
Yeah, I'm finding here, even on a local level, there have been factions that have been trying to tear us apart. And you often wonder what their motive is. We here have been building our Republican base rather strongly and rather proudly. And all of a sudden, in the last year or so, we've got an area, a division of outsiders trying to break into our core group and break us apart. In so much that I've even had attacks on myself on social networks because I'm still running a tea party. And it is amazing how much they want to destroy the voice. I mean, I've been banned on several social networks, still fighting, still clawing my way back. But when you see it on a personal level, on a personal attack from people within your own community going against you, that's a horrible thing. And the only thing I can think of doing is respond with dignity and class. The best thing you can do.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But, you know, I've witnessed this in like our local GOP groups and things like that. I mean, Democrats will actually try to get in so they can help divide us. And the Republicans are letting them in. I'm like, well, wait a minute. What are you doing? I mean,
yeah, really.
A lot of things I just, I shake my head. You know, I try to do what I can. And Annie, you're right. I don't want to stoop to their level, but boy, sometimes I just, sometimes I wish I had duct tape to put it over my mouth because sometimes I can't keep quiet.
I know the feeling.
Annie, I had talked to you about starting a blog, right? On Parler Social.
Yeah.
And we were going to do our kickoff, and I've been in contact with who I thought was Parler Social since July 16th.
Mm-hmm.
The university up in Virginia. And first person I sat down with was a former congresswoman who had run for president. And we get going in this thing, and this guy that was supposed to be from Parler Social with his 4 cameras turned out to be a bait and switch of a left-wing organization that infiltrated what we were doing. And they led me on the whole time that they were Parler Social.
Wow.
That's how low they stoop.
Wow.
Oh, my gosh.
Needless to say, I told that person that we were going to interview, I said, this is bait and switch, get out of here. And I won't go into it any more in there. But they are out there, and they have no conscience. They have no morals. It's about their message getting out there.
And preventing ours.
I would agree. And preventing ours. And what I've noticed recently is, you know, I pride myself on, I'm a very strong conservative. I speak my mind. But if you can bring something to the table that is logical and makes sense, you know what, I will listen. For instance, I went to lunch with one of my neighbors the other day, and I said something about, I don't think that these high-paid athletes deserve the money that they make. And he goes, well, I disagree with you. He goes, because the fans pay their salaries. And I said, well, you know what? You're absolutely right. Who am I to say how much they can make? I don't care for them, so I don't watch them. I don't contribute to them. They can make as much money as they want. So that's where I think we as conservatives and people that have common sense say, you know what? Okay, bring something to the table. I get it. But boy, when you talk to some of these Democrats, they came out and absolutely say, you will never change my mind. And I just shake my head. I mean, for a classic example, you know, I had a woman tell me that late-term abortions don't happen. And I'm like, oh, yes, they do. And that's murder. Oh, no, it's not. It doesn't happen. And, you know, oh, no, you'll never change my mind. Well, I was going to send her some documentation, but then I remembered the story about the donkey and the tiger and the lion. And I was like, you know what? You can't argue with a donkey. So you just walk away.
You know that is the symbol of the Democratic Party, you know.
I know. And that's the reason why this fable or whatever is the story I read about the donkey was so fitting, you know, because, it's not about being right or wrong. It's just like, I got it. I'm right, you know, but yeah. And so, yes. So I,
when the good Lord got into the boat when the seas were rough with the apostles, and he told them to fish and to throw the net out to the right side, they didn't believe him. But when they brought it up, it was full of fish, and they found out you catch more fish on the right side than you do the left side.
Absolutely. I like that.
Oh, yes. You notice we live on the right coast, not the left coast.
Absolutely.
That's right.
Absolutely. Well, it's just, but when we talk about the division of our country, this has been going on for quite some time, but it was so subtle, just like the story about the frog in the water, the boiling pot of water. You slowly turn up the heat and you don't notice it. But now, with everything that's on the fast track since this appointed president, because he wasn't elected, we all know that, but,
Right.
he was appointed. And so by all of this going on, the division and the push to their 2030 agenda is full force because they got to get this done before he dies.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they do, or before another strong Republican gets in there. And your whole thing about the frog, if the American people are the frog, you can cook them, throw them in boiling water, or turn the heat up slowly. At the end, it doesn't matter because either way, the frogs are getting cooked. And that's what's happening to us in our Constitution.
Absolutely. Yes. And, I'm glad I'm as old as I am. I'm not ready to kick the bucket yet, but I feel sorry for the generations behind us because they won't know what freedom was like and what our country was like. I mean, I loved my childhood. I grew up in a great time. And these kids today with the bullying and the peer pressure, and it's sad. It's sad. And with the indoctrination of, like when you were talking earlier about, oh, you're not really a boy, you're not really a girl, you can change that. No, you can't.
No, you can't.
And I'm grateful I grew up when I did. I'm grateful I grew up when I did because I love playing with Lincoln Logs and cars. And if I was growing up today, they'd think I wanted to be a boy. And I was like, no.
Right.
No,
I'm definitely a woman, and I want to stay a woman.
we were blessed that we did not have the social networks kids have today. They are so buried in their smart devices, and it's more important to them to have more likes and friends on Instagram, TikTok, or whatever than it is to know the person sitting next to you in class. They don't know who their next door neighbor is or the person across the street. They don't know physical interaction other than what the LGBTQ community is trying to fend off on them as good personal interaction and physical contact. They don't know what it's like to have a best friend, and when you're feeling down, that friend comes up to you, just gives you a hug to make you feel better. They don't know that. They don't understand that. And if you're using a device, it's impersonal. So now you're just something on the screen. You're an anonymous name. You're an icon, or whatever you want to call it, emoji, whatever you are. You're not a real human being as much as I am a real human being. So your life means nothing to me. So it's easy to push the wokeness, the abortion, and just ignore the violence around us because you're buried in your smart device, and that's your whole world.
Well, and they've taken it so far that your value is how many followers do you have on social media. It's like, who cares?
Yeah. And you're right. And they don't. And the sad part is, moving forward, they don't have any compassion. They have no empathy because it's not necessary when you're looking at a device. And we see so much violence with these teenagers. They're looking for their 15 minutes of fame, and they'll do anything to get it, including murder. And they have no, again, empathy or compassion. But I'm going to go back to a lot of that falls back on, not all of it, but some of it falls back on the parents. When I was growing up, I was not allowed to have a phone in my bedroom, and I wasn't allowed to have a TV in my bedroom. You're going to watch something, you're going to sit out here with everybody else. And, I think today kids are allowed to stay buried in their devices, do whatever they want, and the parents have no idea what's going on. And it's a travesty. It really is, because I see children, and it's just not healthy. Just not healthy.
No, but one of the purposes is now we have a country where you have suburban, rural, and urban areas. You have a whole mixture. But with sustainability, they want to push us all into the urban areas. What best way? You're okay in your little box and your Game Boy and your smart devices. You don't need human contact, and you're happy to go to the job we tell you should be going to. And cars are bad, so you either walk or take public transportation or buy the vehicle we tell you to buy. We were telling you what light bulbs to buy, what toilet seats to use. No. If government can control you, and they can control you through these social networks, which we'll be talking to Jake Denton from Heritage Foundation on exactly this, his technical research. If they can control you through social media and your smart device, they can control your life and then corner you into an area in the country they want you in. And what does that guarantee? It guarantees the destruction, the moral and social destruction of the entire United States of what we were founded on. We get shoeboxed into urban areas, and we keep electing Democrats. That's the whole point.
Yeah, and
Democrats
I think
lead
our
to
last
Marxist
speaker.
lead to totalitarianism.
Yeah, that's what he was saying, and the best way to do it. And Stalin said this too: if I can control the children, I can control the country. And then you do that, and that's exactly what they're doing. And then take religion out of it, take a higher power, because in the Communist Party in China, the highest power in China is the Communist Party. There is no entity higher than that. And that's what they're trying to do that here. And it's time we all wake up, and elections really matter, and we need to get there, and we need to get engaged.
Absolutely.
Not convenient, but it's worth it.
And you have to absolutely research the candidates and research the judges. You need to research the judges, because the police officers are trying to arrest the criminals, and then the judges are letting them out or on low bails and things like that. So, and it's hard to research judges, but we have to do a better job. And people need to understand that if you don't know who that person is, you do not have to check a box on that ballot. So I want people to know, if you don't do your research, just don't throw spaghetti on the wall and see what sticks. I don't like that.
Well, here's another problem.
Right, and then we need to exercise term limits.
Oh, yes.
Our representatives throw their rear ends out if they're not doing what they're supposed to do.
True. But the problem with research is, if it's not done in that little 40-character sentence, if you can't get your point across in less than 1 minute, there is no attention span anymore. How do you explain to a
great
child
point, Annie.
how to use the index cards at a library if they are only accustomed to looking something up on Google or Yahoo, something that controls the search engine and gives them the desired research they want you to see, not what you want or you're looking for, but they'll just shoebox you in. So there goes research. And how do people do research? Oh, we TikTok messages back and forth, and that's how I know who to vote for.
Yeah, and I hope everybody knows that TikTok is controlled by the Chinese Communist Party.
Oh, yes.
I was just going to say that. Yes. No. What I do is I take different parts of their name and I look, and I'm like I said, I'm learning new ways to research, because I don't want to just look at them as a representative or a candidate. I want to find them outside of that to see who they are. And but there's a lot of left-sided websites out there, even for you, Congressman. They slide it against you too. So, because I already checked you out. but they, you know what? And I have to laugh, because you know what? And I'm sure that there's going to be people out there that slide against me as well, because I mean, I think sometimes that maybe physicians don't want to work with me because they find out that I'm a conservative, and you know, I'm sorry you feel that way, because I know what I'm doing. I love what I do, and I take care of my clients very well. But if you don't want to work with me because I'm a conservative, then you know what? There's plenty of other physicians that do want to work with me.
Yeah. I actually happen to be blessed, because every time I go to one of my doctors, they go, and so how's the radio show going? And what do you think about? I'm lucky. I am very, very lucky.
Oh, yes. Yes. Very blessed.
Yeah.
Very blessed.
Oh, man. People can find you at arismedicalsolutions.com. There's a link up on the show page that they can get in touch with you. You got something out there called a Savvy Card that will help people navigate through the HIPAA system. And there's been multiple cases of people challenging medical facilities for lack of following the HIPAA mandate, actually HIPAA law. It is an HIPAA Act. And there have been fines and penalties. I'd like to see a lot of those loopholes closed. There is now, I think it's a 30-day period in order to get your medical records, and there's proposals out there to walk it down to 15. I'd like to see that too. Sometimes getting medical records from a hospital that you knew did something wrong can be like pulling teeth, and I've experienced that personally. So,
oh yes. And if they go to my blog, there's a lot of useful information they can get today.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Susan, it has been a pleasure.
Thank you again.
We've been waiting for our next guest to call in, but we'll welcome you back anytime you want to come on. Just tap Curtis on the shoulder and say, hey, time to get back on there.
Oh, I appreciate it so much. Hey, everyone have a blessed day, and thank you again.
All right. Susan
Thank you,
Schaefer.
Susan.
Check her out at arismedicalsolutions.com. Thank you, Sue. God bless for the hard work you do. All right. Well, Ted,
thank you.
We're waiting for Mark Tapscott to call in, and I'm surprised. He's probably got his face buried in an article he's writing with everything that's going on. So I'm just going to start ahead with some of the things I wanted to talk to him about, and I'm sure that you can chime in easily on this one. And one of the things is our inflation, our growing inflation rate. And we're right now at 8.5%, the highest in 40 years. And everything we see this administration do is the exact opposite of what should be done to pull us out of it.
You're absolutely right. And as you and I talked about before the show, that 8.5 or 8.7% inflation, or no, the CPI index went up 8.7. That means that people on Social Security will get an extra $140. Which is good for them, but there's 65 million people on that. And if you do the math on a monthly basis and then over a year, it'll bankrupt this country. And then right before that, the USDA came out and said they're boosting the average EBT payment, I think, by $130 or $140. And there's millions of people on that. Those things are going to be trillion-dollar expenditures that's not in the budget that is going to bankrupt this country, and our dollar will collapse, and it won't be the world reserve. And if that is to happen, I hope it never happens, but if it does happen, this country will disappear overnight.
That's a scary thought. That is a highly scary thought. I mean, they can combat this CPI index by doing several just very simple things. All right, cut out these mandates. Get people back to work. Open up drilling. Open up and let them build new refineries. The last time a new refinery was built was in the 1970s. Why are we taking our oil, shipping it over to Russia or China, and having them sell it back to us? If we can reduce the price of everyday items on the shelf, we drastically reduce inflation. And not just items on the shelf, goods and services. How much gas would go down? How much would the price of car repairs go down so you can get back and forth to work? That loaf of bread that used to sell for 99 cents is selling for $3.99. That's crazy. How do you feed a family? How do you buy the clothing for them to go to school or the school supplies? How
you
do we
become more dependent on government, Annie.
How do we maintain our public schools? Because your local government's going to be knocking on your door asking you for more tax dollars to keep the schools going, to keep the police going, to keep the firefighters, to keep infrastructure going. Every little bit of that CPI chips away at the value of your dollar. And we could reverse
and in that
the process.
CPI index, the food is not in that and gasoline's not in that.
And that's the largest part of a household budget, those two items.
It sure is. I'm glad you brought up the Department of Energy. I researched that. It started in the 70s under Nixon.
Oh, yeah.
And I think Carter brought it through to fruition. And let's see, there's close to 14,000 employees at the Department of Energy that was tasked to kind of regulate the atomic energy. And they were working on new technologies, but also the energy security of this nation. And the average person in the Department of Energy makes $126,000, which is it's 100 and some percent higher. I think it's 125% above the average American workforce. It might be even a little higher than that. And so this agency was tasked to create energy security or independence for the United States of America. It's failed miserably. Donald Trump comes along. We become energy independent. We're exporting, and we have more natural gas in this country than we can use in 150 years. We should utilize those things. And had we done what we were tasked to do, and we started this through the Foreign Affairs Committee on a bill we had called the Small Scale LNG Bill that would allow us to pump more or send more natural gas down to the Caribbean. And my goal for that was to get them off of Maduro's gas coming out of Brazil, not Brazil, but Venezuela.
Yeah.
And we couldn't get that to go forward. But if we were to do that now, if Biden would come together and put this policy for America, think of what the dynamics in the EU, any of those countries that are dependent on Russia, that they can just exclude Russia. We don't have to worry about OPEC, what OPEC does. We are dictating the energy policy for the United States and our allies. That would be a game changer. But those policies on energy security, they can't be changing within each administration. And this is where Congress has to come together, House and Senate, and put forth, this is the energy policy of the United States. It will not change for 50 years or some period out there, at least 25, 30, 40 years, unless it's a national emergency. You know, the green energy, if you want to go down that route, fine, but prove it and let industry do it, not mandates.
Well, this administration knows how to use the emergency exception. So I don't see anything happening anytime soon. And Fauci proved that by some of his crazy things he put out there saying, well, you don't need a mask. And everyone agreed with him. And then all of a sudden, oh, yes, you do need a mask. And everyone agreed with him. And then he says, no, you got a double mask. And everyone double agreed with him. And then you have to get the vaccine. If you don't, then you need a vaccine passport to prove you got it. And if you don't, then you can't go into that restaurant. You can't go into that theater. You can't fly a plane. You can't get on a boat. You can't even get in a bus. And heaven help you try to get into a taxi cab and the cab driver asks you if you've been vaxxed or where's your mask. Fauci has become a tyrant in itself simply because whatever he says becomes law. But he's not a lawmaker.
You know, we had the opportunity to get rid of him in the Freedom Caucus back in February of 2020, right after this started. And I said, the guy needs to be fired. If not, just he doesn't need to be the spokesman. And they didn't want to push for firing because they felt it would be used against the Republicans and Trump in the next election. And they wanted to write him a letter. And I'm like, you can write a letter all you want. You need action. And I was disappointed in my colleagues that they didn't want to take a stronger stance. And he should have been thrown out back then.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the problem we have is with the shadow government we have, you've got a lot of bureaucrats that control regulations, but then they can make recommendations. And somehow or other, those recommendations have the power of a regulation and then can be elevated into a level of law with criminal and civil penalties. This has got to stop.
Now think about what you just said. Think about the ramifications of that. And Daryl Hannah, he was a member of the European Parliament. He wrote a book called The New Road to Serfdom, talking about the administrative states. And we've empowered ours in this country to where we'll pass a bill for authorization or spending or maybe create a new agency, but then it leaves it up to that agency to write their own rules. And those rules, as you just pointed out, have the force of law because they can put in the regulation, they can put in the fine that goes if you break that regulation, and they can collect the money on that regulation that stays within their department. So they become little fiefdoms within our supposed constitutional republic. And I heard you use that word earlier, bastardized. our constitutional republic that we think we all have has been bastardized by the agencies and by the ineptness and ignorance of Congress and dereliction of duty.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And the enumerated powers of the Constitution have been violated over and over again to the point where they're not even recognizable. Where is it that a congressman, where all laws should originate in Congress, not the Senate or the White House, where is that enumerated power attached to the bill? Explain to me what gives you the power to tell me what toilet seat to buy. What gives you the power to tell me what light bulb to buy? What gives you the power to tell me what car I buy based upon an EPA mileage suggestion? And this is where we're going. This is where we've gone.
That was coming into Congress. Obama came out with the ban on incandescent light bulbs.
Yes.
You remember that?
Oh, absolutely.
They're going to ban incandescent light bulbs, and everybody had to switch to the curly Q fluorescent light bulbs, which are highly toxic. But what did industry do? Industry came out with LEDs that are so much more efficient. It wasn't a government mandate. And so let industry and capitalism fix these problems, and they will if you get out of their way and don't burden them with mandates and regulations. It's lunacy. And we've got the patients running the asylum.
Yeah. But then again...
And if you vote Democrat, if somebody votes Democrat, you're...
Well, then again, we've got an inept administration in here, inept bureaucrats, or maybe not so inept. You wonder where their pockets are being lined. Because Mark Tapscott wrote just 2 days ago in the Epoch Times that the U.S. Department of Energy, the DOE, officials are going to have to soon explain why the government's illicit transfer of $15 million in taxpayer-funded advanced battery technology developed by the U.S., courtesy of the U.S. taxpayer, to a Chinese firm. How do you like that?
Yeah.
Our taxpayer dollars.
It's lunacy again, and it's, yeah.
Well, this is something that's...
I don't know, and I go ahead.
Well, I'm going to say this is something that's really weird, because not weird and not coincidental, but I think planned, because the Biden administration wants by 2013 everyone to be driving an electric car. Electric car needs what? Electric car needs a battery, an expensive battery that sometimes costs more than the car to replace. However, this new battery, called a vanadium redox battery, originally developed in 2006 by U.S. Pacific Northwest Laboratory, they're rechargeable, hold energy longer, and could soon replace lithium-ion devices. Think about the change to our electronic industry, to all of our devices. How much quicker, how much easier, and how much lighter. So now the Chinese are cornering the market on the electric car. They've just cornered a huge load of rare earth minerals needed to make these batteries. And now they just got the advanced technology to replace the batteries they're currently making with the newer ones and corner the entire electronic market. Brilliant. Courtesy of the U.S. taxpayers and the Department of Energy and the Biden administration. Well,
it's been a default of government for the last 30 years, because China, Deng Xiaoping in the 80s said we can't compete with American Japanese technology. But if we corner the market on rare earth metals, we can control the market. And so that was from the 80s. So that was over 40 years ago. And guess what? 90% of our rare earths that we use in electronics and everything else comes from China directly. The other 10% comes from countries that get it from China. Our F-35 fighters, and I've verified this several times with the people in the military, they have right at 4,000 pounds of rare earth metals in there. Now, if we're dependent on a country that's an adversary, does anybody see a problem with this?
The F-35s already have had problems because parts were being manufactured. The U.S. military had parts being manufactured, including the air hoses to the pilots in China. And you wonder why the pilots
and that's not supposed to happen, but it gets overlooked.
Yeah, pilots were passing out mid-flight. We're lucky none died. I mean, I've got the F-35 base, the Buford Marine Corps Air Station, right down the street from me. I mean, I can tell you the F-35 A, B, and C. All right? So
I've got a good friend of mine that's an F-35 instructor and pilot, and he flew missions on it. And he wants to run for Congress, in fact.
Well, got to get someone with the expertise in there to say this technology cannot come out of China. This manufacturing cannot come out of China. We've got to find alternatives. And we gave up a huge treasure trove of rare earth minerals when we gave up Afghanistan. And 5 seconds after we stepped out off that land, out of Afghanistan, China was already in there negotiating with them, saying, we'll build these roads, we'll build these schools, we'll do this and that. Give us the rights to the rare earth minerals. And they did.
As they are in Africa, as they are in South America, Chile, Argentina. Yeah, we're at a point in time, Annie, you and I, that we've never seen in this country. And the only way we're going to come out of this is to elect people that understand these challenges, and it comes from an educated electorate. And programs like yours, with the guests you have, I'm really impressed with your guests that you have that come on, the knowledge that they have, getting that information out to the voters. And again, if you elect a congressperson or a senate and they serve one term and you're not happy with them, throw their rear ends out.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And that's what we have to do. You know, to get back to these batteries, the Department of Energy has a stipulation where the original licensee should adhere to and did not, associated with the license and strengthened, which gave China these technologies. The stipulation included a quota for domestic battery sales as a requirement that the batteries be substantially manufactured in the United States. But when they gave the technology over to Daelim Ronki Power Limited, which is a Chinese company, they also had a second recipient, which is a Dutch company, Vanadis Power. However, Vanadis Power stated in their official website they plan to manufacture the batteries in China. So yes, you sold the license to the Danes, but they're going to manufacture it in China anyway. So China's going to get the entire technology anyway. This is our government at work. Brilliant. But there's a purpose to it. As I said, there is a purpose to it.
Well, enlighten me. What is your purpose?
Well, as stated before, you've got the Muslim segment teaming up with China. You now have this huge caliphate being controlled by the Chinese Communist Party, which has already infiltrated our governments, our schools, our businesses, our entertainment, to control the wokeism in America, to bring down America with their Marxist tyranny. They're chipping away at us bit by bit.
And then you have the media celebrating people like AOC. I'm sorry, my colleague from New York, my former colleague from New York, Rashid Tlaib, Ilhan Omar. And I mean, Ilhan Omar said the only way you can fix America is bring it to its knees and rebuild the country and its economy and government so that there's equity for all.
I love that.
You know, that's never going to happen.
I love that term, equity. Excuse me. We have equality. You have an equal chance to compete against me, but that does not mean you have the same talent I have. And one of us is going to prove out to be better. Equity says it doesn't matter whether you have the talent, knowledge, or skills. You both deserve the job, but because they are of a different ethnic background or race or gender, they're going to get preference over you. That's not equality. That's the new equity. That's the new wokeism.
Yeah, it's wokeism, but it's really racism. You know, I still want to know why Brittany Cooper, professor out of Rutgers, who was on a podcast or an interview and said that we have to adjust America and we need to take out the white MRFers and shoot them. And she still has a position there at Rutgers University.
Yep.
She teaches political science. And it was interesting because there's a group of women of color, some kind of association, that all came to her defense. But I thought it was really interesting compared to our founding fathers who all signed their personal names. They signed it as the group. Nobody was individually named. So I'm wondering, how strongly do you really feel about your statement here? You know, if you're in it collectively as a group, but you don't put your individual name, kind of makes me sound like you wouldn't be there if I really needed you.
Yeah, it does. It does. It's like the scientists that signed their name individually in protest to the climate change argument, where they proved that it was actually a hoax, and yet the scientists that signed saying it's not a hoax were sort of a little bit more anonymous too. They're rather interesting. You know, it's something about called putting your money where your mouth is. Our founding fathers did more than that. They pledged their life, their liberty, and their fortune.
And their sacred honor.
And
yeah.
I just wish Mark had been able to call in, because like I know he gets buried in some of these articles and he loses track time because he does such great work. But he will be back in 2 weeks.
Yeah, he really does. Well, you know, I was at that conference at a university up in Lynchburg, and they had the president of Heritage there, and I believe his name is Kevin Roberts. And he gave a talk about our nation, and he said Heritage, while he's there, they're going after the faith-based things that made this country great. And he gave a great story of the evolution of a Western-style democracy or self-rule. And it started off with Israel and how it went from Israel to Athens, and Athens to Rome, Rome to the UK, and the UK to here. And, you know, we talked about the Magna Carta and all that. He just did an awesome presentation on the development of people governing themselves. And he ended it with saying, when you look back over history, the thing that brought these all down was a lack of morality.
Exactly.
And I can't think of a worse time in America where there's a lack of reality. You know, it's like you were saying with Sue that, you know, to try to convince a little boy he's a girl, you're lying to him. You cannot be a girl. You're a boy. If you don't like being a boy, we'll get some counseling and things like that, but you cannot change your gender. I don't care what they add on or take off or what hormones they give you. You will never be a girl. So who is ever telling you that? They're lying, and it's really medical malpractice for any doctor to do that.
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. I think our next guest may be calling in a few minutes early. Let's double check, because I don't recognize the phone number. Let's bring this person on. Area code 774. You're on the air live with Southern Sense. I'm the host, Annie, with my guest co-host, former Congressman Ted Yoho. To whom am I speaking?
Yes, my name is Matthew E. O'Neill, O''N''E''I''L. I'm the top-rated editor for Everpedia.org. Everpedia rivals Wikipedia, except we have video capabilities. I'm also an author at Amazon.com. My name is Matthew E. O'Neill. And the reason for the quick call is I like to say that I'm also an RNC writer, and I write for the Republican National Committee. And I think that the reason I'm calling is because in times like this, I think it's a really good idea for people to go out and vote and to support Republican candidates.
I agree with you. Right, Ted?
I like to say that I did 4 years. I did 4 years in the Armed Forces, U.S. Armed Forces, on active duty. And my son was born when I was in the military. His name's Dan Marshall. He was born in December of 2000. He lives in Toronto, Ontario, Canada. I was an athlete around the time that he was born. I competed in USA boxing sanctioned matches, beating a member of the federally funded U.S. Army world-class athlete program. His name was Preston Hartson. The match was covered by Into Boxing, a United Kingdom-based company, in 2020. And I think that in times like this as well, I think that the coronavirus is still very active, and I think that sports and athletics are good. But I think some of the politicians should revise some of the mandatory gym classes and physical education requirements for high schools in the invention of the coronavirus. I think they should rethink that. As President Kennedy thought that mandatory gym class and physical education should be a requirement for high school graduates. I really think they should switch that around and get rid of that class.
Well, Ted, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, because,
Yeah. Why would you want to switch that around and give other classes? What's the reason?
I guess my point is that for example, in the state of Massachusetts, in order to be a high school graduate, you need to pass physical education. I passed physical education back in 1994, and I graduated from high school in 1994. And when I was in the military and active duty, I competed as an amateur boxer. I beat Preston Hartzog, who was later Vitaly Klitschko's primary sparring partner for the Lennox Lewis fight back in 2003. In my natural ability in sports, I was able to compete as an athlete based on limited experience and have success. Now, my son was born right around the same time. It's a freak type of thing that happened, but I guess my major point is, with the coronavirus going on, I think someone should contact politicians and say maybe we should rethink this mandatory gym class as a requirement to be a high school graduate. You know, they should rethink some of the policies because the coronavirus is still very active, and nobody has really mentioned this. I just think that someone should bring this to the attention of the president or leading politicians, and let's try to revise this physical education requirement and get rid of it.
Yeah, I think, we need to look at the physical ability of our youth. I just was with some high-powered military people, and they said less than 30% of the people that apply can't meet the minimum physical requirements, with their physical requirement test. Less than 30% cannot meet the standard. So I think we're developing a soft group here, and I think if you look at the numbers on coronavirus, people under, say, 12 to 16 years of age have a very low incident of contracting the virus, and overall there's a 98.7% survival rate of the coronavirus. And I think we can. I personally feel that there should be activity outside, and I think you can do it maybe distancing. But I'd have to disagree with you on that. I understand where you're coming from, but I think it's the wrong way to go.
Yeah, you have your opinion. I guess maybe we'll see as time goes on and the coronavirus, if it gets worse or it stays the same, maybe they will think about changing that requirement. Of course, when I started off in the gym class, my physical education teacher's name was Carl Frymouth. And Carl Frymouth was a Division I state football champion out of Massachusetts for Plymouth High School. And there's an irreverent.org article on Carl Frymouth, who was my gym teacher, as I beat a federally funded athlete named Preston Hartzog. And I also beat an LSU national baseball champion by a 10 count. And the matches that I competed in were accredited by USA Boxing. Carl Frymouth was my physical education teacher, and his article's on everwikipedia.org. So I understand what you're trying to say. When I was in the military, based upon that gym class, it did a lot for me when I was in the military because I got an honorable discharge, and my son was born the same year I was discharged. His name's Dan Marshall. I just think that because the coronavirus is going on, it's something that somebody will take a look at over the years. If things continue to stay the same and there's no cure for this coronavirus, maybe somebody will switch that around and get rid of that class.
Well, Mike, thank you very much for the
Duly
call.
noted.
It's an interesting concept, but I think coronavirus is on its wane. It's going to be around with us like the common cold or any common flu. It's just we have to adjust our lives newly and just not hide behind the rock. Thank you very much for the call and have a great day. All right. We got another caller in here, area code 509. You're on the air live with Southern Sense. To whom am I speaking?
Yeah, hi, this is Jake Denton.
I didn't recognize the phone number. I was getting ready to send you a text. How are you doing? We got Jake Denton from the Heritage Foundation, the research teeth and backwards research associate at the Tech Policy Center. Good afternoon. And I found your stuff as I was doing my stuff last night. Very interesting what you're able to delve into, stuff we felt has been going on all along. And there's some good things going on, but there's a lot of bad stuff with this administration. You were talking about the Biden administration outsourcing online censorship. What did you unbury in an article that was printed yesterday in the Daily Signal?
Yeah, so this is kind of a long time coming, these revelations. So we found out that the Election Integrity Partnership, which is essentially a group of 4 entities, so it's the Stanford University Internet Observatory, the University of Washington Center for an Informed Public, and the Atlantic Council's Digital Forensic Research Lab, assisted by Graphica, which is a third party. It kind of stands out. They're not an academic institution. They're supposedly a social media analytics firm, but they're largely made up of former U.S. intelligence agents. And what this group has been doing on platforms like Twitter and Facebook is essentially policing, content, making flags, things of that nature for admins of these platforms. And then they're being funded by taxpayer dollars through the Department of Homeland Security and the State Department. And on the surface level, it may seem kind of like an ordinary operation, but when you dig a little bit deeper and you read their findings from the 2020 election, you find that it was overwhelmingly targeted towards conservatives, so much so that I'd almost go as far to say as it was designed specifically to go after conservatives. They don't even cite a single left-leaning account within their 2020 report. It's entirely conservative influencers, from folks like Robbie Starbuck, who is a close friend of mine and who I talk about in the article, to President Trump and his son, Donald Trump Jr. They've really just had a full force attack on the 2020 election and all the influencers, and they've now been refunded in kind of what I would call a thank you from the Biden administration to go after the 2022 election. And, when you're weighing how impactful this was, we now know that almost 35-ish% of their flags were taken down. And that comes after them just basically mass flagging things. So if you're able to just, submit a ton of flag tickets, and have that high of a success rate, you're making a pretty sizable impact on the news cycle and these platforms.
Now, how legal is this that the government is now using our taxpayer money to silence free speech of the very taxpayers who are funding this organization?
I personally don't think there's a legal case at all to be made. I think this is blatantly infringing on the First Amendment. You're obviously, your speech is being interfered with through the state. These are state-sponsored entities from the highest level. And, if you look at the report, it seems pretty catered towards this. The director from the University of Washington Center cites it as the populist movement, is what they're so concerned about. So it's a specific group. It's a specific group of people. They're the folks that I'm sure many of your listeners follow on Twitter. And, maybe even some of your listeners themselves are the ones who are being subjected to this. It's not a, unbiased, good-hearted policing of the internet. These are actors with intent. They're looking to silence a very specific type of speech, not just, blanket forms of misinformation that, they cite.
Ted, I'm sorry, I was cutting you off. I didn't mean to.
No, I think it's very accurate what he said, and you ask, how can they do this? They do it under the premise that if you're a conservative, you are not patriotic. Go back to Biden's speech in Philadelphia. He said anybody that supported Trump was an insurrectionist. So they're not stopping free speech. Their narrative is they're going after insurrectionists that are detrimental to what they deem as a republic, but it's not the republic as you and I hold dear. It's a authoritarian state, and so they're doing what they're supposed to, according to their twisted mind thought. And I think it's a very dangerous situation we're in this country.
It is. I mean, the First Amendment, government should not abridge our free speech, and yet the very government that's supposed to be protecting our constitutional rights is abridging our free speech. And what do we do?
That's what they're doing to the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah, so what we're currently witnessing is a battle for cultural hegemony, right? So the left is actively trying to basically kick out any dissenting opinion from the public square, whether that be, in the real world or in the digital world, because our elections are getting so much more contentious. And so it's very electorally and politically motivated. And so, what can we do? Well, unfortunately, when, there's not always going to be a billionaire like Elon Musk that comes around and frees us all from, suspensions or bans on Twitter. Speech is going to continue to be curtailed. It's going to continue to be suppressed and censored. And so I think what's going to become increasingly important is that, even if you are censored on a platform like Twitter, that we don't just turn to an alternative platform like a Getter or a Parler and just, live on happily amongst ourselves. It's important that our voices stay heard, throughout society. We can't just disappear into these little corners. And so, don't go away quietly. If you're suspended, make noise about it, things of that nature, because we can't just roll over. It's going to be important that you put up a fight. You don't just, let your account or your speech get taken down.
Yeah, I know about that. I've been shadow banned. I've had my YouTube taken down. I've had Facebook pull my posts. Yeah, I think Reddit has me completely banned now. So yeah, it's hard for us. And when you're like a tiny little voice, you don't have much to say to work with. If you're a major corporation or a Donald Trump, you can make a lot of noise. So what does a little guy like me do?
Yeah, I think it's really important to stay involved on the local level, right? Your town hall meetings, if your congressman comes back from D.C. and is doing an appearance, make sure you're there. Why is Twitter important? It's because who's able to see your messages, your speech, right? And there are just very few vehicles left today where the average American is able to talk to that elite class. If your congressman isn't doing town halls regularly, call their office and, demand that there are town halls, because once Twitter is cut off, how can you voice your complaints? And that's really what it comes down to, is they're trying to further drive that wedge between the Americans, the everyday Americans, and kind of the ruling class. They're trying to separate you away. And so if you're not able to communicate with them on social media, you have to go into these town halls and you have to, be an active member of the community. And it's important not to just get lost in the online world, stay involved locally. And hopefully with Elon coming in, we'll be able to save Twitter some way. It's not going to be perfect, but it's probably going to be a lot better. But this is just the beginning. I mean, we're going to continue to have our lives digitized. And if we just kind of sit back and don't speak up when things like this happen, we're not going to have much say in the way it unfolds.
It's just amazing.
You're absolutely right. Let me ask you a question. Go ahead, Annie.
No, go ahead. Ask the question.
Jake, if Elon comes in and does Twitter, then you still have Facebook and all these other ones, the Google, what they are doing. And so we're always going to be fighting this. What is your opinion? And I know being at the Heritage and we want free enterprise and things like that, but what about maybe having these high-tech companies, the information technology companies, have them become a utility and regulate them like a utility? If they start self-regulating themselves to who they're going to censor or not, to censor President Trump, the most powerful politician in the world. I mean, if they can do that, the little guy like Annie that got knocked off, she can't have much recourse. But if we had them under some kind of a regulatory environment, and what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, personally, I think everything should be on the table. I don't think, we should rule out any way to solve the big tech problem, because, the minute we start saying, this is too far, something like that, that's when we start to kind of get pushed down the controlled path, right? The direction that they would prefer to go. And so when it comes to solving it, I don't think there's going to be a silver bullet, right? If you were to make it, a public utility, I think you'd still probably find that the cultural issues from within those companies linger, right? Like even if they were, if you were to have this new regulatory environment, it's still the same engineers, it's still the same folks. And what I've been telling people, for quite a while is these companies are creative. They have an agenda and they're going to see it through.
They sure do.
Hopefully we get a good decision from the Section 230 case that we're going to hear in front of the Supreme Court this session. And hopefully next Congress, legislators really, go head on at big tech. But it's kind of an all hands on deck and everything on the table type of environment. I'm really hoping we start to get serious about this, because every day is, another day we're not going to get back. So we got to act pretty soon.
Well, Jake, I got a
No,
question.
you're right about that. And I guess being a free enterprise person, as I know your organization is, the best solution would be to have a bigger, better platform that doesn't do that, and people go to that would be the best way.
Yeah, and so unfortunately, what we've been seeing increasingly in Silicon Valley is a culture of consumption. You have these mega corporations kill any competitor that comes up just through acquisition. And so, if you're taking on Google, you're gone tomorrow because they have the money and the resources to, make sure you don't make it. If you think really back about Google's timeline and progression as a company, they haven't themselves really rolled out a successful product. They've acquired companies that, they could merge with their existing platforms. And they couldn't do YouTube. Google Video was a huge failure, and they acquired YouTube because they couldn't figure it out. They're not innovating. They're not evolving. These are just companies that are further kind of fortifying themselves within our economy. And they're pushing their radical HR agenda on the entire United States and the world now. And so, if we're going to get serious about it, it's going to be antitrust. It's going to be kind of an aggressive approach towards making a competitive market where, hopefully something like a true social or an alternative platform actually could, roll out untampered with.
Well, now you lead me up to the next question. What is this Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act? And there's three components to it. So explain it, because I was trying to wrap my head around it. I'm not a big tech person, but I was just trying to figure out where you were coming from on each one of these things.
Yeah, so this is there are three pieces of legislation that were essentially combined into one big bill. And the three components of them are things that conservatives and honestly quite a few Democrats have talked about for a long time. And it's under the broader umbrella of just modernizing our antitrust and kind of merger environment within the United States to take into account the current tech dominance. And so what we've seen is the rise in multi-billion-dollar mergers outpace kind of the funding and the resource capability for the antitrust divisions at the FTC and the DOJ to kind of keep up and truly police it. So what happened is you had these three bills, first off being the Merger Filing Fee Modernization Act, which is where the bill got its namesake from. And what that aimed to do is to essentially up the fees for multi-billion-dollar mergers. And so they're taking that money and they're pulling it into the Treasury. And then Congress gets to further appropriate it to the FTC and the DOJ upon, necessity, right? So there were bigger mergers, bigger filings that needed more money for the FTC to be able to handle those. Congress can then allocate that money over to the FTC. But it's important, to note here, I'll kind of get why this is important later. There was an appropriations backstop. It wasn't a blank check. So these rogue agencies won't be able to just spend it away. They're going to actually have to have it appropriated to a specific department, specific effort. And then the next one is the Venue Act.
All right, hang on just a second on this one, because you wrote about this first part, possibility that it could even reduce the deficit by $1.4 billion over 5 years. That's a good thing, a good
Correct.
step.
Yeah, so absolutely. And, another benefit to this bill as well is that it lowers the fees for smaller companies, right? So if you're a mid-sized tech company and you're, making a swing at one of these big players and you merge with one of your peers, you're not going to take on a fee that's going to cripple you. You're going to actually have a smaller fee that's going to keep you in the competition within the market. And then, the other benefit now is taxpayer dollars aren't funding the FTC and the DOJ's antitrust divisions. It's coming from these big mergers. So big tech has to pay for kind of the difficulties we then all face as a nation when, we have to try and fund these divisions to police them. So across the board, you can kind of get lost in the numbers with this one, which was why there was some opposition to the bill on the right. but it was just a net positive across the board.
And now the second part. And as I was starting to read it, I made a notation against the first two lines where I said in your article, China and et al. I mean, China and all the other bad players are putting their fingers into the pie. And then I read the next two sentences. You say the Chinese Communist Party. How does the second part help protect us against foreign influence and interference?
Yeah, so the other bill in this package was the Foreign Subsidy Disclosure Act. And so when these multi-billion-dollar corporations decide to merge with each other, they now have to disclose if they've received any subsidies from big tech, if these big tech companies have received any foreign subsidies from foreign entities. And so where that most commonly comes from is China, and it's no secret to anyone. And it's very prevalent within the tech space. And the reason that this is important is that, I mean, wherever the money is flowing from is largely going to determine the way the company goes. And so if we're really going to be able to take on regulating or policing these mergers and also just these big tech corporations in general, we're going to have to know who's, making the decisions. And I think what we'll come to find out, in the next big wave of mergers coming, hopefully after the Senate passes this bill, we're going to probably see a lot of foreign subsidies on the slates with these big tech companies. And it'll, kind of force us into a tough conversation about whether or not these companies that are headquartered in the United States, originated in the United States, are really American companies. Because, I mean, if you're taking big checks from China and it's shifting the way you treat Americans, can you really call yourself an American company?
Like TikTok?
So TikTok is truly a Chinese company, true. But I'm thinking more along the lines of an Apple. These big household tech companies that we kind of have let skate by without any criticism. Microsoft, most notably, their workforce is going to be predominantly based out of Asia. It's outpacing, the U.S. staffing, and so. I mean, if you really start to think about all these companies that, I grew up with and kind of came to rise, in that big initial tech wave, we've kind of always viewed them as American. But I think what's happened is we've kind of just turned a blind eye to the foreign influence, and we've given them the benefit of the doubt when they really didn't deserve it.
Now, what's the third part, the State Antitrust Enforcement Venue Act?
Yeah, so this is another interesting one. So this actually is a bill that solves a long-term problem where a antitrust case gets filed from a state attorney general against any given tech company, and that case is then consolidated into a private case, and it's shopped around. The companies essentially can play ball and see where they can get it in a friendly jurisdiction, and most often that case ends up in California. And so now, let's say, like the state of Texas is hearing this case in California, it's no longer home field advantage. You're enforcing your own state's laws in foreign territory. It's just not a level playing field. And it really kind of exposes a big gap in our judiciary system, right? It's like this idea that you could have this case heard anywhere, even though it's a grievance from, a given state's attorney general. And so what this case does is it stops that. These cases no longer get consolidated into private filings. So, the wind will stay behind the sails. These cases will proceed without any big speed bumps, and then they'll be heard in the jurisdiction of the attorney general that filed the case.
Wow. That's a big move. That is a tremendous big
move. It is.
Yeah, that really is.
Now, that's what I thought I was reading, and I just wanted to make sure I saw it the same way.
That's where it starts.
I'm sorry.
Yeah. Oh, go ahead.
I was saying that's how I thought I was reading it. I just wanted to make sure I was looking at it the way that I thought it was. And yeah, why would an attorney general, say for example, my attorney general is Alan Wilson, want a case he files here in South Carolina to be heard in Baltimore, where he knows he's not going to get
exactly? It's crazy.
But I'd like to see
go ahead.
I'd like to see that with other cases too, outside of antitrust. You see that go in course. Hey, listen, the attorney general's find this, and it's going to be heard in this case, unless you have it in a case where you have 18 or 23 attorney generals put in for a class action against it. That's a different story. But if this is filed in South Carolina, you want to be heard in South Carolina, not in Baltimore, not in New York or California. But how much money that would...
Yeah, we've got a long way to go to modernize.
Yeah, how much money that would save the state, not having to worry about doing a long-distance trial. Man. Well, we only have...
Yeah, no, it's...
I was going to say, we only have a few minutes left on the clock, and we were talking about China earlier and its infiltration into our society, and I had mentioned entertainment, but as Congressman Ted Yoho and I were talking about, they're going after the kids. And if they can control the kids, they control the next generation of voting blocs, the next generation of consumers, the next generation of workers. They can control the next generation of society. And they're doing this now in the video games with propaganda. And now they've got spyware in these video games.
Yeah, so China has just really dove headfirst into the tech space. And one of the main vehicles that we kind of just ignore in the United States is the video game industry. And so what China has done is they've come in through, these state-sponsored corporations from China, the main one being Tencent, which is a big video game company. They handle, the biggest video games in all of China and a lot of the ones that are in the U.S. And they use these companies to buy commanding stakes in American companies and European companies to the point where you could pretty much go as far to say every game, big time game that your kid, wants on their Christmas list for their Xbox or PlayStation, Tencent at least had a little bit of say in the way that game was made. And, while that may seem harmless, what you find is that Tencent is using the Chinese content laws that, don't allow for blood in the games, gambling paraphernalia, things of this nature where, some of them are fine that, kids aren't exposed to, but it goes a lot broader. And you will not have a game that's going to criticize a Chinese president. You might be more likely that you have a game that criticizes a U.S. president. And so through these stories and these video games, you're almost teaching these kids who have no one watching them while they're on the computer a history lesson. And a lot of these times they're so real and they mirror history so closely that your kid's going to walk away with a very different understanding of American history. It's hard to break that gap between what is real and what is fake when it's so closely tied together. And then for the spyware front that you had noted, what you find more often on the computer side of things, right, if your kid's playing on his PC, is that they'll go off and they'll download games that they think are discounted on a storefront that, maybe isn't really an authentic storefront. And you might actually still be able to play the game, but something is loaded alongside it. And then you also have games that are coming from that company I mentioned earlier, Tencent, that have a software built inside to make sure, supposedly, that you aren't cheating, but it really just broadly surveils your whole computer. And that has implications for your whole home's network. If they're able to infiltrate a single device like that, they're on your Wi-Fi router, they're everywhere. And so this really is across the board an area that policymakers need to start taking seriously in the States.
The FCC controls whether or not you get spam phone calls or anything like that, but there's no control over these other smart devices. And I find it amazing that they're all communication devices, so they should fall underneath the FCC purview, but there's nothing being done here.
Yeah, so there's so many layers to this, and what I would argue is that it probably needs action on foreign investment before it needs action on that. You're not at the very core of these companies. They're rotten because they're being influenced by China. And so even if, you had strong regulatory action, but the Chinese were still inside and, taking orders from the CCP, it's like we were talking about earlier. They're going to be creative in how they can, game these regulations. So I think before we really can, solve this problem, we have to really have a hard conversation about whether these tech companies should be allowed to take Chinese investment.
Yeah,
I can make it. I think the best way to deal that is just ban them from coming here and then let them prove that they are not taking that. President Trump, he blocked TikTok and now TikTok's here under the Biden administration. And it's interesting, if you look at China, the CCP, the Communist Party, in China, they ban their children from watching too much video games. And if I understand it, it's only a couple hours during the weekends and on holidays. Other than that, they can't have video games. Yet they inundate our country because they know the Americans have no discipline, and they're going to watch these games over and over again. And what you said about if you download something, China is in your computer. I was with General Alexander when I first went into the Congress in 2013. He was director of the NSA, and he says, if you are on the internet, you need to understand that China is in your computer. That was back in 2013. The technology's gotten so much better, and we have got a mess in this country, and Washington is not paying attention to the important things in this country. They're worried about wokeism, CRT, and all that other. I don't want to say it's insignificant, but it has its time and place, and it's not now in this country.
Yeah, I think we've kind of been asleep at the wheel, and all these problems have stacked up, right? It's going to be a huge task to take them on.
Right. Well, Jake, it has been a pleasure having you on. We're down to our less than 4 minutes on the show. The show has gone by so fast, Ted. People can find you, Jake, at Heritage Foundation, at the Tech Research Center, but you're also a contributor at the Heritage Foundation Daily Signal. So people can find you both there.
Yep, that's correct. I have a few articles posted on the Daily Signal that cover these issues. So if you're interested, feel free to go and check those out.
Well, God bless and we welcome you back.
Jackson, great talking to you.
Absolutely.
Hi, it was great talking with you guys. Have a good one.
Take care, Jake. All right,
if you see Max, tell him I said hi.
I will. All right. See you.
Later, bye.
All right, Ted, we're down to our last few minutes here. And, man, the show is going just so fast. I had a blast with you, as always. We do have next week scheduled from the Heritage Foundation, Virginia Allen. She's the senior news producer for the Daily Signal. So that should be very, very interesting. And you will be my co-host again next week, I assume, right?
I am honored that you're going to have me back. I saw that, and I thank you for the opportunity. And, I think it's so important that you get your message out there, and I think you do a good job. And, again, I'm just blown away by the guest list you have. You've got some high-powered guests, and, the whole thing is inform and educate your listening audience, and I think you're doing a great job. So thanks.
Well, thank you, Ted, and God bless you for all the hard work you are doing and that you will be doing in the future. So I will be speaking to you during the week or next week, and you have a glorious weekend.
Yes, ma'am. You do the same. Take care. Goodbye.
All right. Ted Yoho, former congressman, you check him out there. He'll be here again next week. So I want to thank everyone that was here listening on Blog Talk Radio, up on my webpage, Southern Sense, with the dash in the middle, southern-sense.com. Also up on YouTube and Facebook that were chiming in there, as well as LinkedIn and Twitter. So we're trying to get the message out all over the place. So I will leave you with a song from my friend Gary Pecorella, Save America. So until then, I say good night. God bless.
seconds.
I'm praying for this land I love, America, America, the home of the free. But there are people making plans to change America. They've no respect for her or what matters most to me. That's
60
why
seconds.
I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. Mourn for the friends I have loved and lost. And I still believe God we trust, and the freedom our forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America. Do you hear our battle cry across America? We've got to rescue her. You know it's up to me and you to see the truth behind
10 seconds.
Don't change America. God bless America and the red, white, and blue. That's why I stand for the flag and I kneel at the cross. For the friends I have loved and lost, and I still believe in God we trust, and the freedom I forefathers granted us. I hope it's not too late to save America.